Specializing in light weapon engineering, Gao Yang obtained the 10,000-fold amplification system. As long as he reads books to recharge, the products he designs can be amplified 10,000 times. To recharge, Gao Yang squeezed every moment, reading day and night. Reading in the bathroom, reading while eating, reading even while walking. At 10:30 p.m. in the library of Fangwu University of Science and Technology, several librarians were packing up to leave. They turned to look at their colleagues sitting at the counter who hadn't moved. "Ruo, aren't you leaving?" Ruo with a ponytail propped her chin with one hand and held her phone with the other, not even lifting her head. "The divine man hasn't come out yet. If we leave, will we lock him in here?" The librarian complained. "The divine man still hasn't left. This guy is like crazy. Comes at 6 every morning with a few steamed buns, stays all day, leaves at 10:30, and even borrows books. Reading so many books in one day, how can he finish them? He's probably just showing off. To keep up appearances, he even skips classes. I really don't know how someone like him got into our school." Suddenly the librarians fell silent because footsteps sounded in the library. Ruo instinctively looked in the direction of the footsteps. A person was walking out, about 1.8 meters tall, slightly thin. His hair was messy and dry, his eyes dull, and his face full of exhaustion. In his arms he held several books. Ruo knew this divine man. He was a classmate, and she knew how he got into the school. The former provincial top scorer Gao Yang received the same invitation as she did. But after arriving at school, Gao Yang became obsessed with reading. For a whole year he didn't attend any classes, earned no credits, and only got a disciplinary probation. Probation lasts 6 months. Good behavior can remove it, but poor behavior leads to expulsion. And in these 6 months, Gao Yang not only didn't improve, but still skipped classes and read all day. A year and a half, a top scorer being expelled from the National Defense University. Maybe it will even make the news. But she has been working here for 2 months, crossed paths with Gao Yang many times, and the feeling he gave her was very normal, not at all like the crazy person people talked about. Gao Yang walked to the counter and placed the books on it. "Register borrowing books." Ruo registered while tentatively asking, "What is your first design project?" Gao Yang instinctively looked at Ruo. Few people in the school knew about the first design project because ordinary students only have a thesis, not a design requirement. Only special classes have design tasks during school. Ruo saw Gao Yang's confusion. "I'm your classmate." Gao Yang scratched his head, having been away from class so long that he didn't even know his classmates. He let down his guard. "I'm considering designing a laser gun." Ruo frowned. This statement was full of problems. First, a laser gun has great limitations. It's impossible to make it combat effective. It's okay for lighting a cigarette, but as a weapon. Large shipboard laser weapons can only be used to destroy enemy drones or blind them. The Bald Eagle once said they would use laser cannons to intercept missiles, but so far it only exists in PPT presentations. Actual combat effect is very poor. Designing a laser weapon is one thing, but consider. Tomorrow is the unified inspection. Ruo looked at Gao Yang's expression. "Consider. You haven't started building it yet." "No." Gao Yang looked at Ruo with a baffled expression. "What's the problem?" Ruo, shaken by his confidence, pulled out her phone and checked the date. "But the unified test is tomorrow." Gao Yang came to his senses, quickly pulled out his phone from his pocket, looked at the date. Tomorrow is the day to test the design results. He had been too absorbed in reading, lost track of time. Hurriedly hugging his books, he rushed out of the library. In the library, several librarians stared blankly at Gao Yang's fleeing back, then looked at Ruo with strange expressions. "That divine man is your classmate." They all knew Ruo was a special class student, but that Gao Yang was also in the special class. Ruo quickly packed her things, thought a moment, and said yes, but he's a classmate who will soon be expelled. Professor Li is so strict, Gao Yang will definitely be expelled if he doesn't deliver results. They all walked out of the library together. Outside the library door, Gao Yang, who had just run out, was crouched on the ground reading a book by the light of the library sign. He turned pages very fast, several times faster than a normal. Ruo felt something was off with Gao Yang. She waved at the other librarians to go ahead, then walked up to him. "Why are you reading so urgently?" Gao Yang ignored her, still reading. Ruo pondered. "Come back into the library to read. I'll accompany you. The light is better inside." "No need." Gao Yang replied without lifting his head, focused on the book. He didn't want to waste a second. Ruo said nothing more, went back to the library, turned on the overhead light, and waited by Gao Yang. She actually didn't quite understand Gao Yang. In the 2 months she had been working at the library, Gao Yang would read during the day and borrow books to take home at night. Other colleagues would be late for work, but Gao Yang was never late. Whether wind or rain, scorching heat or severe cold, he came like clockwork every day. Even during the Chinese New Year, Gao Yang still read here. He didn't even rest on New Year's Eve. But she doubted whether reading like this was really useful. Late night on campus, very quiet, quieter as the night deepened. Ruo waited until she was drowsy. At 2:30 a.m., by the library entrance, the wind was cold. Ruo was sleepy, as she had been waiting for Gao Yang for 4 whole hours. She found it absurd. She was like a person possessed watching Gao Yang read for 4 hours straight. From initial doubt, now only admiration remained. Multiple times she felt like giving up, but she gritted her teeth and stayed just to see how long Gao Yang could last. Suddenly Gao Yang snapped the book shut. His dull eyes suddenly ignited with light. In his mind a progress bar that only he could see jumped from 99 to 100. At the same time in Gao Yang's mind a voice only he could hear rang out: ding, 10,000-fold amplification system fully charged. The 10,000-fold amplification system can amplify all products designed by the host with a random factor of 100 to 10,000 times. One amplification opportunity awarded. Gao Yang's body trembled slightly. When he first entered school the system appeared, but damn it needed charging. And charging requires reading books. So he read day and night. Reading while on the toilet, reading while eating, reading even while walking. He squeezed every second to read. For a full year and a half, he went from a brilliant prodigy to a lunatic in everyone's eyes. No time for socializing, no friends in college. Skipped classes, didn't even know his classmates. To save time, he ate steamed buns and noodles every day, losing a lot of weight. But it was all worth it. Once the system is fully charged, it can randomly amplify the effects of manufactured products by a factor of 100 to 10,000. Even if it lands on the worst possible 100-fold amplification, the effect would still be extraordinarily heaven-defying. Others toil endlessly in their research, making extremely slow progress. An improvement of just 10% over the original effect would already be considered a major breakthrough. Gao Yang's creation with a direct 100-fold amplification in effect is absolutely ridiculously powerful. He can hardly wait to give it a try. Gao Yang stood up, glanced at Ruo, and handed the book over, saying, returning the book. Ruo stared at him in a daze. How could this person change so drastically in an instant? Just moments ago Gao Yang had given her the impression of a dull old scholar, but now he suddenly exuded a sunny and lively vibe. It was as if he had become a completely different person. After handing the book to Ruo, Gao Yang dashed toward the laboratory at top speed. He couldn't afford to be expelled. He had to seize the time and produce new research results. If he were expelled, he would never find another place with so many professional books. Although the system was fully charged, he still needed to read books to recharge if he wanted to continue amplifying his inventions. A day was very short, but he still had a chance. Having read so many books before, Gao Yang already had a rough design for a laser gun. Now all he needed was to build it. A laser gun is mainly composed of 4 parts: a laser emitter, a power supply, an optical path system, and a control system. Gao Yang directly ruled out the power supply. Even the battery packs in electric vehicles couldn't meet the energy consumption of his laser gun. He would make a laser gun that plugs into an electrical outlet just to submit the task first. The control system was relatively simple, mainly because controlling a laser gun is straightforward. He could solder a circuit board and finish it in 10 minutes. The optical path system refracts and converges the laser emitted from the laser emitter, allowing the laser's power to become greater. Gao Yang had already conceived of the optical path system long ago. Now he just needed to build it. The laser emitter was actually relatively simple. The infrared lamps sold at the small shop near the elementary school entrance are actually laser emitters. Infrared rays are completely invisible. They are just called infrared lamps, but they are actually laser lights. However, making the laser powerful is where the difficulty lies. But Gao Yang already had a plan. Late at night, despite his fatigue, he began to work on multiple fronts. The optical path system mainly involved grinding lenses. By setting the parameters on the lens grinding machine, the machine could grind on its own, allowing Gao Yang to attend to other tasks during that time. The National Defense University of Science and Technology, also a reserve force for national defense, had many science and technology projects in cooperation with Longhua, so the laboratory was well equipped. The National Defense University of Science and Technology, also a reserve force for national defense, had many science and technology projects in cooperation with Longhua, so the laboratory, from late night until daybreak and until the sun was high in the sky, all the parts were finally manufactured and assembly began. The parts were tiny and numerous, making assembly a delicate operation. After staying up all night, Gao Yang forced himself to stay alert and began assembling the parts. Range No. 2. The experimental shooting range of the National Defense University of Science and Technology. The shooting range was not large, 400 meters in length and only 200 meters in width, but it was equipped with various professional devices that could analyze the performance of light weapons in a highly professional manner. Surrounded by reinforced walls, the area outside was also open, so there was no worry about accidental injuries. At this moment, the special class of the Light Weapons Engineering Major, totaling 30 students, had 29 present, standing in neat rows on the viewing platform at the front of the range. On the left side of the viewing platform were the school leaders, including department heads and professors from the Longhua Academy of Sciences specializing in light weapons research, and even the principal was present. They all attached great importance to this test. It was not only a test of the students' weapon research, but also a test of the special class. When a group of geniuses like these were gathered together and given the best educational resources in Longwa, what would be the result? Professor Li's expression was not pleasant. The formation standing in 3 rows had a missing corner. Gao Yang was not here. Report. Light Weapons Engineering Class 1 should be 30 present, actually 29 present, 1 absent. Professor Li nodded slightly, picked up his manuscript, and said, according to the first phase project assessment rules announced at the beginning of the semester, 5 students form a research group. If you have confidence in yourselves, you can have 4, 3, or even 1 person in a research group. If your project is qualified, you will continue to study in the special class. If it is unqualified, you will be eliminated to the regular class. Whether the design project is qualified will be decided by all the professors on the stage through discussion. Additionally, the top 3 will be selected, and the top 3 research groups will receive cash prizes of 100,000, 50,000, and 30,000 respect. The 29 students present instantly became nervous. The special class had excellent benefits. First, there was a scholarship allowance, full tuition exemption, and an annual subsidy of 20,000. Upon normal graduation, they would be directly granted military positions. Moreover, the teaching conditions were such that all the teachers who came to class were top researchers from the Longwa Academy of Sciences. Many elderly leading researchers came to teach. This was their chance to ascend to the heavens. They couldn't miss it. Professor Li picked up a form and said, there are 30 students in the class, forming a total of 16 research groups. There are as many as 7 one-person research groups. It seems many people are very confident in themselves. Let's start with the single-person research groups. Chow Tao. A student stepped out from the crowd, picked up a box from the side, and said, I have designed a submachine gun. The box opened, revealing a submachine gun not much larger than a pistol. Its appearance was very similar to the Uzi, but with obvious modifications. The modifications to the firearm were not very different in appearance, but from the outside, subtle changes could actually be major alterations. Professor Li took the gun, first hefted it, then raised his eyebrows slightly. The weight distribution of the gun was very good, and the grip felt very comfortable. As long as the rate of fire and accuracy met the standards, this would be a good gun. Professor Li handed the gun to the technicians for further testing. The technicians fixed the gun to the test bench and then fired it remotely. The gun fired for 2 seconds, and a whole magazine of bullets was gone. Even the technicians couldn't help turning around to glance at Chow Tao, reporting, rate of fire 21 rounds per second. Accuracy is relatively high. Professor Li was moved. Comparing with the original version of this gun, the Uzi, its rate of fire under the same test conditions was 15 rounds per second. The school leaders watching also nodded unconsciously. Besides, the increased rate of fire accuracy was also important. Chow Tao's modified gun not only had a high rate of fire, but also high accuracy. It could be considered excellent. The tests continued, and generally there were no problems, but various extreme environment tests were still needed to determine the effect of the modifications. While the designed weapons were being tested at range No. 2, Gao Yang was hastily assembling the laser gun. He connected the laser emitter optical path system and circuit control together, then wrapped them with black insulating tape. With no time to make a casing, he could only wrap the laser gun together with thick insulating tape, and even used 4 small sticks around it to keep the laser gun straight. Soon a black, irregularly shaped laser gun appeared before Gao Yang with a plug attached to the back. At this point, it was considered complete. Gao Yang resolved to give it a try, connecting the laser gun to the socket before pulling the trigger. No sound emerged, only a radiant glow. A dazzling beam of red light instantly struck the wooden chair opposite. At its center, a fist-sized patch of charred blackness had already turned to carbon. The destructive power was already terrifying. If aimed at a human body, it would likely cause massive burns in an instant. The heat conducted to internal organs would prove instantly lethal. Commercially available laser emitters were at most used to light cigarettes, and the more powerful ones found industrial applications for cutting metal. Even more potent variants served as death ray weapons capable of disabling enemy cameras or delicate equipment. Gao Yang's laser gun already belonged to the category of death ray weapons, a handheld death ray with decent lethality. Bringing this out would surely satisfy Professor Li. In his mind, the system's prompt sounded, host detected to have manufactured a laser gun. You have 1 chance for 10,000-fold amplification. Do you wish to use it? Gao Yang pondered briefly. Use it. The next moment, an illusory wheel appeared before him, inscribed with numbers from 100 to 10,000, spinning randomly to determine the amplification multiplier. Gao Yang stepped forward and spun the illusory wheel. It whirled rapidly, and he felt a pang of nervousness. Even the worst outcome of 100-fold amplification would be extraordinary, yet he yearned for the 10,000-fold boost. The wheel's rotation began to slow, and Gao Yang's eyes widened. Judging by its trajectory, it would land on at least 9,000 times. The wheel decelerated further, inching ever closer to the highest multiplier. Instinctively, Gao Yang held his breath. Click! The wheel ground to a halt. The system's voice rang out, "Congratulations, host. This invention's product has received a 10,000-fold amplification in power. Gao Yang was elated. He had hit the maximum multiplier on his first try. In the next instant, the newly manufactured laser gun suddenly disassembled. Then the laboratory equipment began operating at high speed, uncontrolled by any human hand. The machines whirred with the ferocity of a runaway stallion, each device roaring thunderously. Material after material was fabricated. Simultaneously, vast quantities of raw materials floated in the air before rapidly assembling themselves. A scene both eerie and beautiful, as though countless invisible hands were working in unison to piece together the components. Initially, Gao Yang had believed his design to be sufficiently complex. But now he witnessed thousands of precisely machined parts being accurately joined together, forming the main body of the laser emitter with metal coils wound around it. The coil wires were also temporarily smelted using the laboratory's furnace. The formula for these coils was worth a fortune. The optical path system underwent similar upgrades. Superior materials and finer polishing enhanced the laser amplification effect even further. After a full 10 minutes, the laboratory's roar ceased. In Gao Yang's mind, the system's prompt sounded: laboratory equipment, outdated materials insufficient. Due to inadequate conditions, cannot complete 10,000-fold power laser gun modification. Current laser gun power amplification 162 times. Gao Yang could see that the system had utilized the laboratory to its utmost potential, but even the cleverest housewife cannot cook without rice. Still 162 times. The resulting power would be utterly insane. The gun he had just made was already formidable, multiplied by 162. Just how devastating would it be? Gao Yang wanted to test it, but dared not, fearing he would destroy the laboratory. Yet this was not the end. The system began infusing a vast ocean of knowledge into his mind. All the knowledge pertaining to the 10,000-fold amplified laser gun, covering materials principles and manufacturing techniques. Now, given high-end production equipment and sufficient materials, Gao Yang could fabricate a laser gun with 10,000-fold amplification. As the knowledge settled in his mind, Gao Yang clearly understood that he had become a titan in the field of lasers, centuries ahead of humanity. This revelation stunned Gao Yang. The system was absolutely incredible. Not only did it amplify inventions, but it also fed back the enhanced knowledge to him. Even the scraps of knowledge he now possessed could reshape the global landscape of optics. As he continued to research and amplify more creations, he could propel the long kingdom forward at a breakneck pace. But first he had to fulfill his agreement with Professor Li. He picked up the laser gun from the table, casually stuffed it into a plastic bag, and carried the bag to the No.2 shooting range. When Gao Yang stepped out of the laboratory, dusk was falling. After a full day's work, it was already 6 o'clock. He wondered if he could still make it in time. With the result in hand, Gao Yang was no longer anxious. Even if the school expelled him, they would have to follow procedures. As long as he unveiled the laser gun before the process was complete, he would be retained. Even if expelled, presenting the laser gun would have him carried back in a sedan chair. Yet regardless of his confidence, he still owed a measure of respect. When Gao Yang entered the shooting range, his classmates were still there, though the test seemed nearly finished. The distant targets were almost obliterated. Professor Li had been beaming with pride, for the students had performed exceptionally well. All 16 weapon designs were commendable. Most were complete designs. After only a year and a half of study, achieving such results was already outstanding. This essentially affirmed the special class accomplishments. However, upon seeing Gao Yang, Professor Li's expression darkened rapidly. Student Gao Yang, the design presentation deadline was 7:30 in the morning. What time is it now? 6:30 in the evening. Professor Li handed the pistol he was holding to Ruo, his expression softening slightly. Had it not been for your contribution to this pistol's design, you would have been expelled already. But this pistol's improvement is merely passable, far from excellent. What you learn from reading in the library cannot match the lessons taught in class. Gao Yang was momentarily stunned. He had not participated in designing that pistol. Then he saw Ruo winking at him, and instantly understood she had added his name to the design team. But why would Ruo help him? He couldn't fathom it. Though he was somewhat handsome, surely not that handsome. Professor Li's voice cut through Gao Yang's thoughts. Gao Yang, your probationary penalty remains in effect, 6 months. If you behave well during that time, the punishment will be lifted. Gao Yang snapped back to reality, reporting, sir, I did not participate in that pistol's design. I have an independent design work. Professor Li turned to look at Ruo, then back at Gao Yang, repeating, are you certain you are not a member of the dancing dress research group? Gao Yang hesitated for a moment. Whoever thought up that name, Dancing Dress Research Group, was truly a genius at naming. I am certain. Professor Li swiped on the tablet in his hand. State your research group's name. What is your design work this time? Gao Yang thought for a moment, then asked, if the design work is excellent, does it help the research group? There is a cash reward. Then can I join the Dancing Dress Research Group now? Professor Li raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Was Gao Yang that confident in his own research? Was he even trying to repay a favor? You may. What is your research? A laser gun. At this moment, the expressions of everyone present changed. It is well known that the more flashy something is, the more useless it becomes. It's not that laser guns are useless, but the technology required for them is too advanced. Not to mention students, even top-tier research institutes cannot produce laser weapons with decent combat effectiveness. Not to mention portable laser weapons like this one. Gao Yang opened the black plastic bag and took out a laser gun wrapped in black insulating tape. At this moment, the whole audience burst into laughter. The students were laughing not out of mockery, but because they found it amusing. Before Gao Yang pulled out the laser gun, they had actually thought he might have learned something from the library. But now a legend is a legend. Holding a stick wrapped in insulating tape and calling it a laser gun. He's truly gone mad from reading too much. Professor Li's expression was equally indescribable. He had actually held expectations for Gao Yang. What a joke. The principal and other school leaders also frowned. The department head sighed with regret. Gao Yang was once the provincial top scholar. Perhaps due to excessive pressure, he's having mental issues. He'll arrange for someone to take him to the hospital for a checkup later. The principal frowned. Someone who could become the top scholar is a genius. To stand out among so many people in Dragon Country, he must have extraordinary qualities. If such a person has mental problems, it must be taken seriously. Ruo lowered her head under the accusing gazes of her other 3 group sisters. She had actually thought Gao Yang was normal. Last night she accompanied him for half the night, and felt that he was different from the rumors. So she felt sorry for Gao Yang being expelled, and temporarily added his name to the research group. Now she has become a laughingstock. Not just her, but the entire research group. From now on, as long as she remains in school, she will be ridiculed constantly. Gao Yang could see everyone's attitude and understood them. He said calmly, "If you all step into scientific research positions in the future, I hope you won't judge people by appearances." The laughter quickly faded. Gao Yang's words made them uncomfortable because they couldn't refute them. Gao Yang looked at Professor Li and said seriously, "I didn't leave enough manufacturing time, and I had to rush to participate in this test. I didn't have time to make a casing, but the laser gun can still be used as is. Can we proceed with the test?" Professor Li looked at the laser gun in Gao Yang's hand. He found it hard to believe it was a laser gun, but still nodded. "You originally have a test opportunity." Taking the laser gun from Gao Yang, Professor Li first examined it, then fell silent. The more he looked, the less it seemed like a laser gun. The most absurd part was that there was a plug at the back. Does this laser gun need to be plugged in? Yes, it can run on AC power, but the power is weaker. If possible, using 3-phase power, or even high voltage power will make it stronger. Professor Li pondered. In his view, even 220V is dangerous, let alone 380V 3-phase. He looked at the technician. "Go pull the wires over." The technician quickly brought the wires, put on insulating protective clothing, and fixed the electromagnetic gun onto the automatic shooting platform. After doing this, he stepped back several paces and looked at Professor Li. Professor Li also stepped back a few paces and looked at Gao Yang. "Can we proceed with the test?" "Yes." The technician stepped back even further in case the thing exploded, he would be safer. In the stands behind, a group of people also instinctively ducked their heads, equally worried that this crude device might suddenly explode. The technician carefully pressed the remote control button. A click sound of electrical discharge. Then the laser gun activated, and from the front of the gun, wrapped in black insulating tape, a dazzling beam of light burst forth. At 6:30, the sky was already dim, but with the test firing of the laser gun, it became bright. The extremely brilliant red laser instantly struck the straw target in the distance. The straw target was pressed from multiple materials and had extremely high strength. But the moment it touched the laser, it carbonized. Even the metal base beneath the target was instantly melted, dripping onto the ground with a sizzling sound. The laser continued to hit the wall behind the shooting range. The thickened wall was instantly melted into a large hole. With a sizzle, the wire couldn't withstand the current, and the rubber burned through, causing a short circuit. The power went out, and the laser disappeared. In fact, the laser lasted only 1 second, fleeting. But everyone's eyes in the range were dazzled. The laser was too blinding. Now they all had a black line before their eyes, an afterimage left by the brilliant laser. Everyone was tearing up. Suddenly exposed to such intense light, though not blinded, they were very uncomfortable. But now no one cared about the discomfort. Looking at the carbonized target in the distance, the hole in the thickened courtyard wall, and the flames outside, they were filled with nothing but shock. The entire venue fell into dead silence. The thing they had just laughed at was a real laser gun, and a laser gun of terrifying power. Their previous mockery came back to them like slaps. They were the ones who were frogs at the bottom of a well. Half of the school's senior management, who had come to watch, stood up, involuntarily stunned. In the dead silence, someone couldn't help but say this. Is it definitely not a laser cannon? More students reacted. Holy crap, what the hell? Did I just hallucinate? Where's the straw target? How is it gone? Forget the straw target, even the iron stand under it has melted. When did laser technology become this awesome? The students' discussions gradually grew louder. The principal and the college leaders in front also gradually came to their senses. They were actually more composed, but compared to the students they knew better what this shot meant. This meant a major breakthrough in the field of laser technology. Such a laser gun cannot be manufactured in Dragon Country right now. Not to mention Dragon Country, the whole world cannot produce it. Gao Yang was also shocked. He had never tested this laser gun after the amplification. The power of this first use was simply terrifying. This was only the effect of 162 times amplification. If the full 10,000-fold amplification were used, how terrifying would the power be? That laser just now carbonized the straw target instantly and melted the stand beneath it. Not only that, it also hit the wall 400 meters away. Even the bricks were melted. The temperature was at least tens of thousands of degrees. If this hit a person, it would directly carbonize the enemy. This is a real laser gun. Aim and fire. The enemy cannot escape or dodge because optical weapons attack at the speed of light. This can basically achieve 100 interception of missiles because seeing equals hitting. No need to predict. Gao Yang suppressed his shock and looked at Professor Li. Is my laser gun qualified? Professor Li's body trembled slightly as he looked at Gao Yang, tears and self-reproach glistening in his eyes. How many grievances had Gao Yang, a genius, endured because of his own lack of understanding? He even felt like kowtowing to Gao Yang right then. Gao Yang could see the professor's remorse, but didn't take it to heart. He had spent all his time reading, which did appear somewhat obsessive to others. Misunderstanding was only natural. In fact, Professor Li had given him multiple chances. Anyone else who skipped class for a whole year would have been expelled long ago. Moreover, Gao Yang cared little about others' opinions and felt no distress. On the contrary, he was quite happy when left alone, undisturbed in his reading. Professor Li gazed at Gao Yang as if beholding a rare treasure. This wasn't just a genius. This was a bloody prodigy. Excitement, elation, and guilt mingled within him. His composure shattered. He wept and laughed simultaneously, his voice unnaturally gentle. This laser gun is extremely advanced, but the matter is significant. I need to confirm. Did you build it entirely on your own? Gao Yang nodded. Yes. However, the lab equipment is inadequate and the materials are insufficient, so for now, I can only produce a laser gun of this level. Professor Li froze again, his eyes widening. You mean your theoretical knowledge supports the creation of even better laser guns limited only by the lab conditions? Professor Li could barely contain his excitement. He took a deep breath to steady himself, then glanced around. Many things couldn't be discussed here, and there were no testing facilities on site. A more professional venue was needed for testing. Professor Li addressed the students. Gao Yang's laser gun is the top design of this term. Any objections? No, a student said. More voices echoed in agreement. They were all geniuses, proud of their own abilities, but in the face of Gao Yang and his laser gun, pride was out of the question. They barely dared to breathe. The school administrators also shook their heads. They dared not dissent. Gao Yang's word had become their decree. A 19-year-old who had already produced a groundbreaking product like a laser gun. His future achievements were limitless. While others strived after graduation to become the pride of the school, Gao Yang already was the school's pride. The principal shot to his feet. Gao Yang's first place is well-deserved. Are you satisfied with your life at the school, Gao Yang? Feel free to raise any suggestions. Even Professor Li couldn't help glancing at the principal. In his 10 years at the school, he had never heard such an ingratiating tone. Gao Yang did have a suggestion. The student card only allows borrowing 4 books at a time. That's a bit limited. The principal was taken aback. That was his complaint. From now on, the borrowing limit will be doubled to 8 books. As for you, Gao Yang, there will be no restrictions. Borrow as many as you. This freed Gao Yang from being confined to the library for reading, making things much more convenient. As he stepped down from the stage, he walked over to Ruoro and whispered, "Thank you." Ruoro knew he was thanking her for adding his name, but she felt embarrassed. Even without my help, you wouldn't have been expelled. I acted on my own. Gao Yang smiled and said nothing more. Professor Li then selected the second-place design of the day. Compared to the indisputable first place, the second place was utterly meaningless. Nobody even vied for it. The once arrogant geniuses had become meek, one and all. No comparison, no harm. Their designs were not even qualified to share the stage with the laser gun. The second and third places were quickly decided, but no one cared. All attention remained fixed on the laser gun and on Gao Yang. Previously, they had looked at Gao Yang as if he were a lunatic. Now they viewed him through a heavily filtered lens, a genius immersed in his own world of thought, transcending worldly matters, detached and aloof, surpassing the realm of ordinary mortals. Even his plain clothes were seen as a sign of spiritual attainment, neither delighted by external gains nor saddened by personal losses. Ruo couldn't help stealing a few glances at Gao Yang. Though his hair was disheveled and dark circles hung beneath his eyes, he was quite handsome, and with that focused expression he exuded a compelling charm. After honoring everyone, Professor Li began distributing documents. Confidentiality agreements. Regarding the laser gun, everyone present received. Ruo instinctively glanced at the laser gun wrapped in a plastic bag. Did this thing really warrant a confidentiality agreement? But then again, such a weapon represented not just a laser gun, but a breakthrough in laser technology. The Ten-Thousand-Fold reward wasn't merely a prize, it was essentially hush money. Everyone signed the confidentiality agreement, and yet many felt a bitter taste in their mouths. They were all students, yet one of them had submitted an assignment that required a confidentiality agreement from everyone. Comparison is the thief of joy. But everyone was convinced. Their designs simply weren't on the same level as Gao Yang's. All the privileges he received were well-deserved. After the event, the students went their separate ways. Professor Li personally drove Gao Yang. Your laser gun needs to be tested at the 𝂃 Institute to determine its actual power and parameters. Do you want to come along? Gao Yang already had a rough idea of its power. Going to the test would just be for spectacle. No. Professor Li nodded. Where shall I take you now? The library. Professor Li felt a surge of admiration. He had once thought Gao Yang's constant trips to the library were obsessive and unproductive. Now knowing their purpose, he could only admire him. Especially after achieving such success with all the glory, he could still calm his mind and read. That was truly worthy of respect. Parking in front of the library, Professor Li looked at Gao Yang. I'm sorry. I used to say reading was less effective than attending lectures. Gao Yang smiled. Under normal circumstances, relying solely on reading certainly couldn't compare to having a teacher's guidance, which made understanding easier. Especially since the teachers of the special class were all leading experts in their respective fields of scientific research. However, Gao Yang had the system. Professor Li watched Gao Yang enter the library, then turned his gaze to the laser gun on the passenger seat. He still felt as though he were dreaming, that such a crude device could possess such terrifying power. This was undeniably a breakthrough in laser technology. He drove to the school gate, where several military vehicles had already arrived. Their mission was to escort Professor Li Qing and the laser gun to the 𝂃 Institute's light weapons research facility for testing. This scene drew many gazes. So many military vehicles armed escort, such a grand show. Was Professor Li a spy? But Gao Yang, the cause of this dramatic spectacle, continued reading in the library. He wasn't being diligent out of habit. His earlier frenzy of reading was for the system, and now his hurry was the same. Once the system had fully charged, it granted a 10,000-fold amplification opportunity. But to obtain further amplification chances, it still needed recharging. And the way to recharge remained the same: by reading. Gao Yang had a conjecture, which was that the process of reading was actually a way for him to adapt. Reading was training his mind, allowing him to bear the sudden influx of vast knowledge after gaining the system's enhancement. This was merely a conjecture, one that couldn't be verified. After finishing a book, Gao Yang took an hour of reading speed that was significantly faster than before. Many concepts in the book were already understood by him, allowing him to skim through it. After finishing a book, Gao Yang's mind sank into the system. In the system interface, a brand new progress bar appeared. At this moment, the progress was 0.3%. This meant that by reading 3 books, he could charge 1%, and only needed to read 300 books to fully charge. Even if Gao Yang read only 10 books a day, he could complete the charging in a month. Under extreme conditions, he could read 20 books. He could finish charging in half a month, and then gain the opportunity for a second 10,000-fold enhancement. A smile appeared on Gao Yang's face, even turning into wild joy. He was now afraid of having to read for a year and a half to gain an enhancement like before. Not far away, Rua, who had finished her meal, walked into the library and immediately saw Gao Yang. Clearly, he had already achieved impressive results and could still focus on studying earnestly. This behavior was absolutely worth emulating. Then she noticed Gao Yang reading while smiling. She instinctively glanced at the book title on the material and structure of Bulletproof Vest. Seeing someone so happy while reading such a specialized book was even more impressive. She wanted to approach and talk, but seeing Gao Yang pick up another book and concentrate deeply, she returned to the counter to start reading while working. With people smarter and more hardworking than her, what reason did she have to slack off? The library was quieter in the evening, filled only with the soothing sound of pages turning. While Gao Yang was reading and charging, Professor Li arrived at the Light Weapons Research Institute. At this moment, many military vehicles and helicopters were already parked in front of the institute. Not only the researchers, but also military personnel received a sudden call. The laser gun with immense power could potentially revolutionize the current tactical framework of long. Professor Li entered the research institute, holding the laser gun, looking at the hundreds of eyes staring at him. I have already applied to the higher-ups. During this test, no one is allowed to take photos, videos, or recordings. Everyone undergo a re-identification check. Those who received the notification to come here were basically big shots, and someone incredulously asked, "Old Li, is it really that exists?" Li Qing shook his head. "Once you see the test of this laser gun, you'll understand that I am not exaggerating at all." Everyone began cooperating to hand over their communication devices, confirming that they had no electronic devices on them before entering the massive shooting range behind the Light Weapons Research Institute. The definition of light weapons is broad: handguns, sniper rifles, rockets, individual missiles, and anti-tank missiles all qualify. as light weapons as long as they can be carried and used by an individual or a small unit. The Light Weapons Research Institute was vast, and so was the shooting range behind it. All necessary facilities were available, but there were no specific devices for testing the laser gun, which had to be prepared temporarily. Technicians following 𝓃's instructions set up steel plates at distances of 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters, and up to 1,000 meters. Steel plates with a thickness of 2 centimeters already had quite good defensive capabilities. A group of researchers watching from the front of the shooting range looked at Professor Lee, who had a stern face. A laser gun with immense power. It's you. If someone else said it, we wouldn't believe it. Professor Lee turned to the speaker. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I wouldn't believe it either. This is a leap in laser technology. The group of researchers fell silent, filled with super anticipation. 𝓃 was not someone who made empty claims. If he said, so the laser gun must be terrifying. As for the specifics, they would have to wait for. As night fell, over 100 people on site were all spirited. Soon the setup was completed and the technicians approached Professor Lee. We have finished the arrangement according to your requirements. We can proceed with the test. Professor Lee solemnly took out the laser gun and handed it to the technician. The group of people standing behind Professor Lee's eyes suddenly widened. Was this a laser gun? It looked like a stick wrapped in insulating tape. This was a groundbreaking technological breakthrough. There was even a plug at the back. This design was a bit too punk, wasn't it? However, out of trust in 𝓃, no one at the scene spoke up. The technicians were stunned for a moment before securing the laser gun onto the launch pad. At this moment, Professor Lee turned around to introduce this laser gun. Can be powered by 220V electricity or high voltage electricity. The power will differ. No one at the scene spoke. If it had been anyone else, they would think the speaker was crazy. For this test, we will first use 220V electricity. Once the technicians had secured everything, all devices were powered on. When the laser gun fired, they could collect as much data as possible. Professor Lee glanced back at those who seemed skeptical without warning them that it would be very dazzling and quietly put on sunglasses. Begin the test. Technicians powered it on and then remotely pressed the switch. A bright red laser instantly illuminated the entire sky. The laser pierced through the first steel plate, then the second, third, and the 10th. The laser gun's firing duration was 1 second. That meant it would automatically shut off after 1 second. In just 1 second, the laser gun penetrated 10 steel plates. A steel plate placed 100 meters away had a hole the size of a human head in the center with the edges still glowing red. The molten steel on the ground remained in a semi-solid state, still emitting smoke. Even with sunglasses on, Professor Lee felt a bit dazzled. Looking back at the group of people with tears streaming down their faces, he felt much better. I almost forgot to mention, the laser is quite bright, so you need to wear sunglasses. Laser gun. A researcher specialized in laser weapons trembled as he stood up, rushing to the front of the laser gun in a few steps to examine it closely. His expression was akin to that of a pilgrim. When he received the invitation, he was merely curious about what breakthrough the laser gun had made. Now he realized it was a comprehensive breakthrough. No, using the term breakthrough wasn't quite right. It should be called an update, a revolutionary technological advancement. Currently, the development of laser weapons worldwide was actually leaning towards precision operations. Since its power had limitations, it was compensated for by operations. For instance, unmanned drones carrying laser weapons could automatically lock onto objects with lenses using lasers to continuously damage the lenses. But with the increase in laser power, was there still a need to damage the lenses with laser weapons? No, wouldn't it be enough to directly use the laser weapon to destroy the target? If steel plates could be melted through, so easily destroying a tank would be a piece of cake. More people who had come to their senses gathered around the laser gun. Those invited were all knowledgeable, whether researchers or military personnel. They viewed the laser gun from different perspectives, but their shock was equally profound. The researchers were astounded by the technological breakthrough. The military personnel, on the other hand, were stunned by the terrifying power of the laser gun. And it was a lightspeed weapon. Its role on the battlefield would be absolutely enormous. The military personnel, on the other hand, were stunned by the terrifying power of the laser gun. And it was a lightspeed weapon. Absolutely absurd. 𝓃 turned to the technician. What are the test data, just now? Almost everyone simultaneously looked at the technician. They had just witnessed the power, but it was not specific enough. The technician snapped back to reality and hurriedly checked the data on the computer. The maximum temperature at the laser impact point just now reached 3700 degrees. The entire venue fell silent again. Light itself has no temperature, but when it shines on an object, light energy is converted into thermal energy. In theory, the temperature caused by lasers can reach hundreds of millions of degrees, but more realistically, the temperature of laser cutting is around 300 degrees. Reaching 3700 degrees instantly is already super terrifying in comparison. Moreover, this was instantaneous irradiation. If it were continuous, the temperature would be even higher. The technician's voice trembled. The temperature difference between the first steel plate and the second steel plate is 200 degrees. This meant the laser's energy loss was very low. According to the current test results, even if a steel plate were placed at a distance of 100 meters, the laser gun's range could reach 18 kilometers. This was almost the result of maximum loss. If there were no steel plates along the way, the laser loss would be even lower. Additionally, people on site thought of another factor: voltage. With the lowest voltage supply, the power is already this great. What about using high voltage? Professor Lee waved his hand. Everyone stepped back. Continue testing. Everyone returned to their original positions for the second round of testing. This time the steel plate was placed 3 kilometers away. After adjusting the laser angle, they fired the laser gun. The steel plate was again penetrated. Temperature measurement, 3600 degrees. This meant that the laser's energy loss during flight was extremely low, and the theoretical range exceeded the previous test, reaching 70 kilometers. Late at night, all researchers and military personnel were in high spirits, staring intently at the test results. The shooting range had a maximum distance of 15 kilometers. The target 15 kilometers away was destroyed, and the temperature test still showed 0 degrees. This basically confirmed that the laser gun's effective kill range was 65 kilometers. This was already terrifying. As a ground-to-air laser weapon, this power could destroy all aircraft and missiles. See and destroy. And this was only under household voltage supply. At midnight, the second round of testing began using 380 V. The test power increased again, with the maximum temperature reaching 4500 degrees. This temperature could melt almost everything. The theoretical effective range could reach 100 kilometers. Professor Lee was already satisfied with this result. He glanced at his watch. It was already 2 in the morning. Let's call it a day. Continue testing tomorrow. No one on site wanted to rest. Even though they were already exhausted, their excitement at this moment offset their fatigue. Oldly, let's continue. Can't we still connect high voltage? Li Qing hesitated. He also wanted to continue testing, but regarding high voltage, Gao Yang had only mentioned it briefly without specifying how high. Regarding high voltage, the developer only said it could be connected, but didn't specify how high. A group of researchers immediately looked at Li Qing. Isn't this laser gun your invention? No, the developer is my student. Everyone's expressions turned a bit strange. A professor familiar with Li Qing asked curiously, you only have 2 doctoral students. Their research direction isn't laser weapons, is it? Li Qing waved his hand. No, it's a student from the special class. Many on site knew about the special class, but they were all somewhat incredulous. A military officer who didn't know the situation asked, what special class? Someone explained, it's an experimental class at the National Defense University of Science and Technology. It invites only outstanding geniuses, aiming to cultivate a group of top defense researchers. The military officer's eyes lit up, that high in quality. Another voice rang out on the field, very confused. I damn well teach in the special class. How come I don't know about such a genius? Li Qing didn't want to reveal Gao Yang's name. There were too many people. Let's not discuss this for now. Should we continue testing? Let's continue. Don't use too high a voltage first. Let's try 1000 volts. The technician began the third round of testing. 1 kilometer away, 10 steel plates were stacked. This would slow down the burn-through rate and allow more data to be measured. After connecting the power supply, the technician, wearing thick protective gear, said, ready to start testing at any time. Professor Lee said solemnly, start testing. The next moment, power was on. The moment after, a burst of light many times stronger than before erupted. The sky lit up again. It was fortunate that this small arms research institute was in a remote location. Otherwise, people who read too many novels might have thought a divine treasure was emerging from the constant flashes of intense light. The distant steel plate was instantly melted through. The 10 stacked steel plates lasted only 1 second. The base under the laser gun also couldn't withstand the extreme heat for more than a second. As everyone squinted, the metal base fixing the laser gun softened and collapsed entirely. The rear end of the laser gun was pulled by wires, so the rear end dropped downward, and the front end with the laser emitter pointed at the sky. The next moment, the laser emitter fell to the ground and shut down instantly. At the same time, the 100 volt current passed through, burning out the laser emitter, which emitted green smoke. A group of researchers had never expected this and rushed forward. The technician quickly turned off the power. Professor Lee held the hot laser emitter, clearly feeling that the inside had become loose and had fallen apart into components. Other researchers and military personnel were also heartbroken, unable to breathe. Was this terrifying laser gun prototype really broken from a fall? But no one could be blamed. The laser gun's power was too great, melting the automatic shooting stand at close range, something they hadn't anticipated. While everyone was lamenting the laser gun, someone suddenly said, just now before the laser gun broke, it seemed to have swept across the sky. The military bigwig said solemnly, it's fine. When I came, I temporarily controlled the airspace in this area. There were no aircraft in the nearby sky. But there are satellites in the sky. The bigwig frowned. Low orbit satellites are at least 200 kilometers above. Can this laser's range reach 200 kilometers? The researcher who mainly studied laser weapons took over. The higher the altitude, the thinner the air, so the laser's energy loss is smaller and the range is longer. With the higher voltage, it's really hard to say. Another researcher spoke up. Theoretically, the range could be even longer, but the probability of destroying a satellite is extremely low. If it actually hits, you might as well go buy a lottery ticket. No one paid any further attention to the earlier mishap. All focus was on Professor Lee. The laser gun might be broken, but as long as the person who mastered the technology was still around, it could be rebuilt. Suddenly, an alarm blared at the Longwa Aerospace Center. In an instant, numerous technicians took their positions. What's happening? A Starlink satellite orbiting over Longwa has just been destroyed. Based on the data relayed by the satellite, the cause of destruction was a laser beam. The technicians at the Aerospace Center were stunned. A laser? Where did it come from? It must have been fired from the ground in Longwa. From the ground. A laser fired from the ground could destroy a Starlink satellite. The technicians were bewildered. Had human laser weapon technology really advanced to this level? They hurriedly reviewed the transmitted footage, clearly seeing a red laser beam pierce through the Starlink satellite, instantly obliterating it. It was definitely a laser. The Aerospace Center personnel immediately calculated the approximate origin of the laser based on its angle and timing. Within 2 minutes, the general area was pinpointed, but that region had been declared a no-fly zone with no aerial vehicles present at the time. But how could a ground-based laser possess such immense power? Even if the laser were fired from just 1 meter away, it would be impossible to emit a beam capable of instantly destroying a satellite. The more the Aerospace Center analyzed it, the more perplexed they became. This wasn't just happening at Longwa's Aerospace Research Center. The Bald Eagle Research Center had also captured the same footage. However, unlike the confusion at Longwa's Aerospace Center, they were filled with shock and fear. Had Longwa's laser weapon technology really advanced this far? Capable of easily destroying satellites. This was definitely major news. They had to find a way to gather more information. But to obtain information, they needed a pretext. When the company behind the Starlink satellites received the call from the Bald Eagle Aerospace Research Center, they were still bewildered. They had indeed lost satellite signals, but with thousands launched each year, a few signal losses were perfectly normal. They hadn't noticed anything unusual at all. Only after receiving the call did they realize the gravity of the situation. They immediately issued a statement. A Starlink satellite had been destroyed by a laser weapon over Longwa. Instantly, the whole world erupted in chaos. This was a monumental event. It was the early hours of the morning in Longwa, so few people were online, but given the vast population, even a small fraction was a significant number. A handful of night owls surfing foreign websites saw the statement and jolted awake. Longwa destroyed someone else's satellite. They quickly captured screenshots and posted them on Longwa's domestic networks. Longwa netizens who saw the screenshots dismissed them outright as fake news. A laser shooting down a satellite. There was no such powerful laser weapon in existence. At the Light Weapons Research Institute, the group had yet to realize the severity of this testing error. Everyone stared intently at Professor Lee, waiting for him to reveal the truth about the laser gun. They refused to believe that the laser gun was designed by a student. Li Qing spread his hands. The designer and manufacturer really is just a student. What's his name? A professor who taught in the special class asked sternly. I teach that class. How could I have missed a student of such high caliber? Li Qing pondered for a moment before finally saying, Gao Yang. Gao Yang. That prodigy. A group of bewildered people turned to the professor who had spoken, their eyes filled with doubt. He was already being called a prodigy. Was he really that remarkable? The old professor frowned at their gazes. Prodigy is just a nickname. He never attends class, spends all his time in the library, and is a well-known figure at the National Defense University of Science and Technology. Li Qing interjected. The laser gun was Gao Yang's first design project. That's impossible, someone exclaimed. This isn't even something your university could produce. The internal components of this laser gun have a precision of 0.1 micrometers and use novel materials. If you told me it was a joint effort by multiple research institutes, I might believe it. But a single student? Impossible. Another professor added. And the breakthrough in laser technology. No matter how many books a student reads, they couldn't achieve this. Someone else chimed in. A technician who can operate a 0.1 micrometer precision machine tool can walk with swagger in our institute. You're telling me a student under 20 can do it? Do you take me for a fool? A military bigwig also spoke. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, no one would believe this. Exactly. Seeing is believing. Can you arrange a meeting to watch him build another laser gun? Li Qing looked at everyone's expressions and understood their intentions. They didn't really disbelieve. They wanted to meet Gao Yang. But the problem was he was starting to feel uncertain. Initially, he had been so awestruck by the laser gun that he hadn't considered its plausibility and had directly taken it for testing. Now reflecting on it, it was truly implausible. Gao Yang's creation of this laser gun defied reason in countless ways, not just in terms of technology, but also in manufacturing and so many other aspects. I need to contact him first. Li Qing pulled out his phone and dialed. Just as the call connected, someone nearby said, It's 4 a.m, he must be asleep. Li Qing realized this and was about to hang up to avoid disturbing Gao Yang's sleep when the call was answered. Gao Yang's slightly weary voice came through. Professor Li, you're still awake. 𝂃 was a bit surprised. Gao Yang found the question odd, calling someone in the dead of night, and then asking why they weren't asleep. Wasn't that ridiculous? Not yet. I'm reading. The assembled bigwigs held their breath, nodding approvingly. He truly seemed to love learning. 𝂃 felt a bit embarrassed. I made a mistake while testing the laser gun at the institute, and it's broken. That's fine. It was just an assignment to turn in. If it's broken, so be it. The bigwigs instantly lost control of their expressions. They felt a bit humiliated. What did he mean by an assignment to turn in? If an assignment could be this incredible, what had they been researching all these years? Shouldn't he consider their feelings before speaking? 𝂃 was also taken aback. I was wondering if you could make another one. Tomorrow. He'll go to the lab and make another one. All right, 𝂃 sighed with relief. Get some rest, don't overwork yourself. I'm going to sleep now. The dial tone sounded and the bigwigs finally dared to speak. If he's willing to make another one, it's likely true. Then what are we waiting for? Let's go. 𝂃 thought for a moment and said, you haven't slept all night, shouldn't you rest first? We can nap in the car. Within 10 minutes, the convoy set off with researchers and military personnel, heading straight for the National Defense University of Science and Technology. The researchers who had said they would rest in the car found themselves unable to sleep. The tremendous leap in technology left them excited and exhilarated. Now a hint of anxiety crept in. They worried that Gao Yang might not be able to produce another laser gun. At 7:30 in the morning, Gao Yang awoke, having slept only 3 hours. Though still somewhat fatigued, he had grown accustomed to exhaustion from his days of reading by lamplight. Instinctively picking up his book, he read while brushing his teeth, and even while using the restroom. Book in hand, he pushed open the dormitory door and headed for the library. At the fork leading to the library and the teaching building, Gao Yang paused. Had he really not attended class in over a year? That seemed rather inappropriate, didn't it? Perhaps he should go to class. Having come to university, shouldn't he at least experience student life? The system had already activated and the next opportunity for enhancement was charging. There was no need for such urgency. Changing direction, Gao Yang headed toward the teaching building. It had been so long since he had last been there that he had to check the class group chat to find the room. Building 8E, the 8th floor. The classroom had been buzzing with lively discussion, but the moment Gao Yang entered, an abrupt silence fell. Everyone looked at him with surprise. Had the legendary figure actually come to class? Gao Yang closed his book and asked, where should I sit? Instantly someone stood up and replied, sit anywhere you like. If you wanted to sit on the podium, even the professor would give up the spot for you. A girl also rose and said, here I'll give you Ruo's seat. The classroom once again erupted into lively chatter. Ruo's cheeks flushed. There was nothing between her and Gao Yang, but she couldn't withstand the teasing. Gao Yang smiled, but didn't actually walk over. He took a seat in an empty row at the back and asked, what were you all discussing so heatedly just now? Gao Yang was now the center of attention in the class. His laser gun had already won over everyone. His classmates regarded him with admiration and respect. There was also a sense of guilt, remorse for the earlier nickname, legendary figure. In response to Gao Yang's question, someone immediately answered, a Starlink satellite over Dragon Country was shot down by a laser. The Eagle Country is now blaming Dragon Country, saying it violated space rules. Gao Yang looked surprised. This is a major international incident. Indeed, but using a laser to shoot down a satellite is an exceptionally difficult technological feat. Gao Yang nodded. Extremely difficult. It requires advanced laser weapons and a precise targeting system. If launched from the ground, the precision demands are even higher. If it were a shipborne laser weapon, the difficulty would be slightly reduced, but whether it could hit depends on luck. Hearing Gao Yang's analysis, classmates gathered around. Gao Yang, could your laser gun shoot down The power would certainly be sufficient, but the precision isn't high enough to aim effectively. Low-orbit satellites are still 200 kilometers high, and laser weapons can't adjust their angle like missiles when approaching a target. So it's challenging. I wonder how Dragon Country will respond. What else? They'll play dumb, of course. With such advanced weapons, they'll hide them as long as possible. First, they'll issue a statement saying they're investigating. That will drag out the attention, and when everyone stops caring, they'll explain it away as a misunderstanding. Before he finished, someone said, Dragon Country has released a statement. They're investigating. At that moment, Gao Yang felt that the atmosphere in this class was very different from what he had imagined. It was quite lively. As for the news, Gao Yang didn't think much of it. He understood laser guns well, but precisely because of that understanding, he overlooked the element of luck. At 8 o'clock, class time arrived, and the whole room quieted down waiting for the teacher. They waited 10 minutes, but no teacher came. Someone looked at the class monitor. Should we call? The monitor dialed. It's turned off. Let me call Professor Li. After a moment, the monitor put down the phone. I've called everyone. All turned off. In the classroom, all the students were bewildered. All the numbers were unreachable. It was unheard of for a teacher to be late, let alone have no one in. Rare indeed. What was going on? Gao Yang also frowned. This was the first time ever he had come to class and no teacher showed up. The monitor stepped onto the podium. Let's wait. While we wait, we can exchange ideas on the first design project. Suddenly someone turned to Gao Yang. This class is on optical weapons. Why don't you teach it? Gao Yang was taken aback. In terms of knowledge, he had no problem. His mind contained ample and profound knowledge about laser weapons. I don't know how to teach. That statement was flawed. Not knowing how to teach and not willing to teach were two different things. Sure enough, almost 7 or 8 voices chimed in at once. Just talk casually. Seeing the eager looks of his classmates, Gao Yang smiled wryly and walked up to the podium. I won't follow the slides, just share a few of my thoughts. Great. Applause filled the classroom. Gao Yang thought for a moment. Technical aspects are a bit complicated. Let me talk about theories and some simple ideas. Great. More applause. Gao Yang smiled again. The first time he attended university class, he ended up as the lecturer. His train of thought was clear. He could simply share some relatively simple concepts from his mind. There was no need for a systematic approach, so there was actually quite a lot he could say. As Gao Yang began to speak, the lively atmosphere in the classroom vanished, replaced by seriousness, because everyone could tell that Gao Yang truly had substance. A few words here and there could spark inspiration. Some scrambled to take notes, realizing improvements they could make to their earlier design projects. Points they had previously overlooked now came to mind as they followed Gao Yang's line of reasoning. Others took notes on the ideas themselves. Everyone listened intently, fully aware that this lecture was worth a fortune. This included a group of researchers waiting outside the school. These men with dark circles under their eyes waited in their cars. Professor Li was also waiting for Gao Yang to notify them. But they waited until 9 o'clock and the group of bigwigs lost patience. Old Li, why don't you call and ask? Gao Yang hasn't contacted us yet. Professor Li hesitated. He didn't sleep until 4 in the morning. He might still be asleep. Let's wait a little longer. The group of bigwigs had to wait. Meanwhile, in the special class, everyone listened in rapt fascination. Almost everyone was taking notes. Their eyes shone brightly. Gao Yang's lecture had already moved from theoretical concepts to technical aspects. Many things they couldn't understand, but that didn't matter. They just had to write. On the podium, Gao Yang felt a bit conflicted. He had planned a lecture for 1 period, but 2 had already passed, and the teacher still hadn't arrived. With 4 periods in the morning, was he supposed to teach all of them? At the end of the 2nd period, Gao Yang saw that all the students were still sitting upright. Go to the restroom. If the teacher doesn't show up next period, it'll continue. The class monitor stood up and bowed to Gao Yang, followed by the entire class in unison. Initially, they had admired Gao Yang for his laser gun, but now admiration had turned into deeper. At that moment, Gao Yang's phone rang. He took it out and saw the caller ID, Professor Li. He answered, and Professor Li cautiously asked, "Did I disturb your sleep?" Gao Yang was somewhat bewildered. I got up early and have already arrived at the classroom, but no professor came to teach, so I covered 2 classes. Professor Li was taken aback, then realized the issue. Neither side had communicated properly, each waiting for the other to reach out. It was a misunderstanding. But hearing Gao Yang's words, did he actually go to the classroom to teach? Professor Li found it hard to believe, yet also felt a flicker of hope. He confirmed, "Are you teaching in the class?" "Yes, the assigned teacher didn't show up, and since I was here I decided to share some experience." Professor Li turned to another professor beside him. This morning that professor had a class scheduled. The researchers could also overhear the conversation and scratched their heads, muttering, "Forgotten. At this hour, who would think about teaching?" Professor Li paused, then said into the phone, "Go ahead and teach first. Once the class is over, you can craft the laser gun." Gao Yang glanced at the eavesdropping students below and their expectant gazes. All right. He pocketed his phone and looked at the students who had returned from the restroom and now sat up straight. "Let's continue. That was Professor Li on the phone asking me to keep teaching. For the next 2 periods, he'll be with you again." Applause erupted once more in the classroom. Gao Yang smiled and resumed his lecture, determined to finish what he hadn't covered earlier. Yet a nagging thought crossed his mind. Wasn't he supposed to be experiencing college life? Why had he ended up teaching? In the car, the group of researchers exchanged bewildered glances. The teacher had forgotten to go to class, and Gao Yang had gone to teach instead. One professor suggested, "Why don't we go to the classroom and see how he teaches?" Professor Li was intrigued. "Shall we take a look?" Yes. Most of the convoy consisted of military vehicles. At the Fangwu University of Science and Technology, military vehicles were inconspicuous because they were everywhere. The vast majority of students here were active duty soldiers engaged in research, so military vehicles were abundant. Yet a long line of military vehicles was rare. The cars drove directly to a teaching building, and the senior military officers alighted first. Many onlooking students were stunned. There were stars on the officers' shoulders. Stars were common among officers, but on this high-ranking general's shoulder, there were only stars, no bars. 1 bar indicated a company grade officer, 2 bars field grade, and no bar meant general grade. 2 stars, a lieutenant general, a supreme military leader. The students were dumbfounded. Was a top general here on an inspection tour? The next moment, car doors swung open, and a group of elderly researchers stepped out. Their caliber wasn't immediately evident since their attire lacked insignia. The next moment car doors swung open and a group of elderly researchers stepped out. Their caliber wasn't immediately evident since their attire lacked insignia. What level of researchers were these? Amid the students' curiosity, the group swiftly made their way to the classroom. Inside the classroom, Gao Yang was about to start his lecture when he saw the crowd approaching, led by Professor Li. He paused and greeted Professor Li. "Continue your lecture." "Well, just sit in and listen." Professor Li rubbed his hands together and walked toward the back. Then the rest of the group filed in. The students in the class were bewildered. As members of a special class, they were well informed given that their substitute teachers were usually top experts. But now dozens of equally distinguished research luminaries plus military leaders bearing general stars had come to listen to Gao Yang's lecture. Gao Yang, however, was unfazed. His confidence ran deep, for his mind truly held substance. The laser knowledge instilled by the system had placed him ahead of his time. Besides, he couldn't just stop teaching mid-lecture. As everyone entered and the room became packed, he announced, "Now let's continue." All students instantly snapped to attention, listening intently. The professors in the back soon became absorbed as well. They had initially been curious about how Gao Yang would teach, but after hearing just a few sentences, the group of researchers began breathing heavily. What Gao Yang was saying also resonated with them. It was about efficient energy conversion methods, and it seemed to be entirely new content, something no one had proposed before. This was also a novel technology, and Gao Yang was simply explaining it. Reflecting further, such technology had actually been employed in the laser gun. Under everyday voltage, energy release was extremely slow, yet the laser gun's immense power came from utilizing this efficient energy conversion method, reducing energy loss during the conversion process. As they listened, the experts could no longer contain themselves. Lowering their voices, they approached a student. "Excuse me, could you spare a sheet of paper? I need to take notes." The student, who was busy taking notes, turned around startled. "I need mine too, but I can give you a page." "Thank you." The expert accepted a page, rested it on his palm, and began scribbling furiously. Other researchers followed suit. The notebooks of the students in the back rows were nearly stripped clean. Gao Yang stood at the podium, taking in everything below, and felt a surge of admiration. These were all top-tier researchers, yet while listening to his lecture they could set aside their pride and take notes. Utterly absorbed, without any concern for face, Gao Yang didn't mind going a bit deeper. Earlier, fearing the students wouldn't understand, he had kept things relatively simple. Now he could introduce more complexity. As the material grew more intricate, even the notebooks of the second-row students were exhausted. After 2 periods, Gao Yang again overran by half an hour. He put down the marker pen. "That's it for today. Class dismissed." The students were somewhat dazed. The first 2 periods had been fine, but the last 2 left them utterly lost. They understood nothing. However, the later arriving researchers were enraptured, thinking only this is possible. Their minds were completely opened. What Gao Yang had described could be applied not only to the laser gun, but also to almost every device requiring electrical energy. Many experts were so excited they wanted to rush back to their labs right then. But a more important matter awaited. They were going to watch Gao Yang craft a laser gun on the spot. Those who had previously doubted that Gao Yang had made a laser gun were now fully convinced. His brilliance had won over everyone. The very notes they had scribbled were invaluable. The students rose, bowed, and prepared to leave. Professor Li dashed to the podium in one stride. "Wait, everyone. Sign a confidentiality agreement. The content of today's lecture must not be disclosed." The special class students were stunned. "Sign again." Yet upon reflection, it made perfect sense. What Gao Yang had taught was clearly ready-made technology. And it was technology that didn't exist before. Its value was immense. Though not comparable to the laser gun, it was still a technology capable of revolutionizing the industry. This technology could even serve as the foundation for a high-tech company. Simply licensing the patents would generate enormous revenue. The group glanced through the confidentiality contracts, their eyes filled with envy. When would they reach Gao Yang's level, such that anything they casually presented or any lecture they gave would require everyone to sign a confidentiality agreement? After signing the contract, all the students departed, yet the researchers still packed the classroom to its fullest capacity. Initially, some of them harbored skeptical thoughts. After all, a student creating such a terrifying laser gun was too astonishing for the world. But after sitting through this lecture, they were already mostly convinced. Though convinced, they remained in shock. Gao Yang was barely 19. How could someone of this age possibly achieve such a feat? Yet the mere content of Gao Yang's casual lecture had already won their admiration. A crowd surged forward, heading to the cafeteria. It was midday. They needed to eat first. Gao Yang, surrounded by the group, felt somewhat uncomfortable. Even more uncomfortable were the students of the school. They were utterly bewildered. What was happening? Why were a group of bigwigs walking around this prodigy as if stars encircling the moon? The top-tier researchers with their lofty positions and the military big shots with stars on their shoulders need not be mentioned. Were these people actually ingratiating themselves with Gao Yang? and that plump professor holding a paper and asking questions beside Gao Yang. It looked exactly like a student seeking guidance from a teacher. But how was that possible? That plump professor, many recognized him, was the director of the Laser Weapons Research Institute. This scene shocked the eyes of countless students along the way, leaving them utterly baffled, not knowing what had transpired. During the meal, they drew countless sidelong glances, but no one dared to approach, only watching from a distance and murmuring. After finishing the meal at noon, Gao Yang headed straight to the lab. Before reaching the lab, Professor Li said, "Let's go to the school's top-tier laboratory. It has everything." Gao Yang's eyes lit up. The previous lab, though well-equipped and excellent, was not top-notch. The school had another lab, a world-leading facility. But not even ordinary professors, let alone students, were qualified to use it. Even those who were eligible had to apply well in advance. This lab also had access to the super brain. All computations during experiments could be directly offloaded to it, greatly enhancing research efficiency. "Can we go straight in and use it?" Gao Yang hesitated. "Absolutely." Professor Li took out his phone, turned it on, and called the principal. He hung up quickly and looked at Gao Yang. "It's available, though the principal will come by to see later." "Fine." Gao Yang didn't mind being watched. He was also eager to try the better lab. They'll first check the lab's configuration. If it's good enough, the laser gun's power can be raised another level. Professor Li shuddered. He recalled Gao Yang's earlier words: if the lab equipment was sufficient, the laser gun's power could be even greater. The surrounding professors were also stunned. What did that mean? The previous laser gun wasn't the strongest version. It was only that powerful because of the conditions. At that moment, their anticipation soared. The crowd moved in a throng to the lab. Professor Li asked, "Do you need any assistance? The lab has operators to help with the fabrication." "No need." Gao Yang's eyes were already captivated by the lab's equipment, which was on average a full tier above the previous labs. All kinds of materials were available in abundance. Gao Yang quickly changed into a white lab coat, stepped inside, rubbed his hands, and began checking the parameters and usage methods of various devices. During this time, a group of researchers stood outside the lab watching. Through the highly transparent glass, Gao Yang's operations inside were clearly visible from outside. But the sound couldn't penetrate, and there were blinds inside that could be drawn to block the view. This provided the researchers inside with an almost interference-free experimental environment. However, since Gao Yang's fabrication this time was a demonstration, he didn't draw the blinds. Outside stood not only the researchers, but also military bigwigs and school administrators. They had also heard about the laser gun. This was a matter of great importance. For researchers, it was a technological breakthrough. For the military, an enhancement of combat power. For the school, a source of pride. What other school had such an outstanding student? Fangu University of Science and Technology. Meanwhile, the school staff, also unsettled by the news, turned to Professor Li. "Professor Li, can this laser gun shoot down satellites?" Professor Li looked at the principal in slight surprise. "Impossible. Even from a low altitude of 200 kilometers shooting from the ground. Even if the power is sufficient, the accuracy wouldn't be there. To hit a satellite, you'd need an ultra-high precision targeting system, and it would depend on weather conditions. A cloudless sky is essential." The principal nodded his heart at ease. Everyone's gaze converged on Gao Yang, who unhurriedly finished inspecting all the equipment and gained a rough understanding. This lab was indeed excellent, world-class, but it could only increase the laser gun's power by about 300 times. To achieve a 10,000-fold increase was far beyond Longwo's current technological level. Still, 300 times was quite good. "Let's get started." Gao Yang dashed to the machine tool, inputting various part parameters into the control console. The machine would then process the parts automatically. The equipment for the optical system was also available here. Additionally, there was the material ratio for the laser emitter and the smelting of metallic materials. At this moment, Gao Yang became a spinning top, weaving among the numerous devices. Outside the lab glass, a crowd of people stared wide-eyed. Gao Yang's operational skill far surpassed theirs. Even technicians who specialized in operating individual machines couldn't match his proficiency, could they? Not just proficiency, but precision, flawless without a single mistake. It was as if the entire process had been rehearsed countless times in his mind. The fabrication proceeded smoothly and efficiently. Professor Li watched, then turned to an elderly man. "Weren't you the one who didn't believe he could operate those machines?" That old professor was the one who had earlier doubted Gao Yang's ability to use the ultra-precision machine tool. Now he was being thoroughly proven wrong. Yet there was no embarrassment on his face, only excitement. "He's this skilled," he exclaimed. Even if he had no research ability, with this operational skill alone, he could command a high salary. The group nodded, and after a moment someone else asked, "He's smelting the metal coils himself. And he's manually polishing the glass lenses a second time. Can human polishing compare to machines?" Outside, the researchers were utterly astounded by Gao Yang's operations. Having not slept all night, they should have been drowsy, but the more they watched, the more awake they became. Because astonishment was everywhere. Gao Yang spent a full 3 hours preparing the parts. The school leaders, researchers, and military personnel stood there for 3 hours. Though mentally fatigued and physically exhausted, they all appeared exceptionally spirited. Their eyes grew wider and wider. With the parts ready, Gao Yang sighed in relief. This meant the 300-fold power laser gun he had designed could be built. Next came assembly. Lifting his head, Gao Yang met dozens of eyes. Eyes with dark circles filled with weariness, but even more with anticipation. The assembly was exceedingly difficult, for the laser gun contained numerous intricate components of high precision. Under normal circumstances, even with technical expertise, manufacturing such a device would be impossible. However, Gao Yang possessed a comprehensive memory encompassing not only the technology of the laser gun, but also the craftsmanship required for its creation. Now capable of fabricating a laser gun with 10,000-fold amplification, assembling one with a mere 300-fold amplification was a trivial endeavor. Donning a pair of glasses with a high-power magnifying lens, Gao Yang commenced the assembly. Outside, separated by glass, a group of distinguished onlookers watched with bated breath, barely daring to exhale. The entire laboratory inside and out was so silent that a pin dropping could be heard. Every researcher stared with wide eyes, their gaze bloodshot. It had been over 30 hours since they had last slept, yet they remained fervently awake. The assembly process lasted 2 hours. Gao Yang set down his glasses, rubbed his eyes, and gazed at the completed laser gun on the table. He snapped the outer casing shut. This new laser gun not only boasted a more refined internal structure and greater power, but also possessed an elegant exterior. The silver heat-resistant shell secured the internal components, making it far less prone to damage from falls. Looking up, Gao Yang once again met countless hopeful gazes. The laboratory door swung open, and Professor Lee rushed in first. Fixing his eyes on the streamlined laser gun, he was visibly moved. Compared to its predecessors, this laser gun truly embodied the fantasy of what a laser weapon should be. It measured about 30 centimeters in length, 3 centimeters in width, and 20 centimeters in height. Larger than a pistol, yet smaller than a rifle, it resembled a submachine gun. Lifting the weapon, Professor Lee was immediately struck by its comfortable grip. The handle was adorned with textured ridges to enhance friction. It weighed approximately 12 to 13 G. Professor Lee's voice trembled slightly. Has the power surpassed that of the previous laser gun? Gao Yang removed his gloves and outer coat. It's about twice as powerful. Professor Lee's head snapped up. How much? Twice as much. Professor Lee's grip on the laser gun tightened. His heart quivered, fearing he might drop it. Let's go back to the test range. Gao Yang suddenly reached out and grasped the laser gun, looking into Professor Lee's bloodshot eyes. We cannot test it now. You all need rest. We'll test it tomorrow. This group had conducted a test late last night, then called him at 4 in the morning. They had been awake for an entire day and beyond without rest. They must not push themselves to the brink of collapse. Professor Lee slowly released his grip and turned to the principal. Make the arrangements. The principal made a call to book rooms at a near. He then arranged for the researchers and military personnel to take their rest. All of them had been awake for over 30 hours. Though still exhilarated, exhaustion weighed heavily upon them. Now that they had witnessed Gao Yang's creation of the laser gun, the great burden in their hearts had been lifted, leaving them much lighter. They returned to the hotel and sank into a deep slumber. Gao Yang meanwhile headed to the cafeteria for a meal, then promptly made his way to the library. Ruo was also in the library. Upon seeing Gao Yang, she stood up and quickly walked to his side. Brother Yang. Gao Yang interrupted her directly. Don't call me Brother Yang, it feels strange. Just call me Gao Yang. He remembered that during his 3 years of high school, for the first half year others called him Brother Yang, but for the remaining 2.5 years they all called him Brother Wei. Ruo nodded. It seems Dragon Kingdom already possesses a laser weapon of immense power. Gao Yang looked at Ruo with a hint of doubt, for it seemed unlikely. Under the superior conditions of the school laboratory, it was possible to create a laser gun of considerable power. But this was not mass production. The conditions for mass production could never match the laboratories, and the power would be greatly diminished. Ruo handed her phone to Gao Yang. The Eagle Nation has released a video showing a laser destroying a satellite. Gao Yang took the phone. The first thing he saw was a statement from the Eagle Nation claiming that based on the laser's angle and the time of the event, they had determined the approximate region where the laser was emitted. They urged Dragon Kingdom to continue its investigation. He then tapped on the video. It was only 10 seconds long. In the footage, a Starlink satellite orbiting peacefully in space was suddenly pierced by a laser beam, its main body melting away and disintegrating on the spot. Gao Yang furrowed his brow. Dragon Kingdom's research in the field of lasers was far more advanced than he had imagined. Then his brow relaxed. As expected of Dragon Kingdom, truly, as the saying goes, if it's too outdated it can be shown. While they claimed that laser weapons had little practical significance and could only be used to shoot down cameras, they were using a laser gun to shoot down a satellite. This laser weapon already possesses considerable power and has significant practical application. With such precise targeting, it's likely already operational. Ruo was somewhat surprised. How does it compare to your laser gun? Just from this video, I can't discern the specifics. There's no basis for, Gao Yang said, also becoming intrigued. He thought of calling Professor Li to see if he could gain access to this laser weapon. There might be unexpected insights to gain. But Professor Li was likely fast asleep by now. It could wait until tomorrow's test. He returned the phone to Ruo, turned around, and went to find books to continue recharging the system. Ruo took the phone back, and watched as Gao Yang found a book, sat down, and began reading. A sudden sense of motivation struck her. Had she been wasting time on gossip? She put away her phone and began reading as well. Online, the news about the laser striking the satellite had exploded in popularity. Dragon Kingdom's earlier statement had been an attempt to suppress the heat, but the Eagle Nation clearly had no intention of letting it fade. They were vigorously fanning the flames, amplifying the incident's buzz. The second statement's meaning was simple: I've already told you where the laser was emitted. You're still investigating. Can't you speed things up? Now the entire world was watching this matter, and it was indeed putting pressure on Dragon Kingdom. Dragon Kingdom, for its part, was truly conducting an investigation. They had already determined the location of the laser emission, and they knew that there was a light weapons research institute there. At this point, the information needed to be handed over to the Long Academy of Sciences. After all, the Light Weapons Research Institute was under the Long Academy of Sciences. Before investigating, they needed to notify and obtain permission. Then the investigation got stuck because when the Long Academy of Sciences tried to contact the relevant parties, no one could be reached. They only knew that a test had been conducted late last night, classified as top secret, with even the airspace closed off. When they attempted to contact the people in charge, not a single person could be reached. All phones were turned off. They couldn't get through. When they contacted the Research Institute, the staff there refused to say anything. The Long Academy of Sciences even tried to reach the military personnel, but again, all phones were off. It was as if the entire group had vanished into thin air. Moreover, the project's security classification was so high that they could not forcibly investigate. They had to seek someone with higher authority to intervene. The director of the Long Academy of Sciences looked at the file placed before him, opened it, and frowned. He saw Professor Li's report application, and the more he read, the more absurd it seemed. A university student had invented a laser gun of immense power. Normally, such wording would be dismissed as exaggeration, but the situation was different now. A satellite had already been shot down by a laser in the sky. The director instinctively looked up at the sky. A laser gun that could destroy a satellite. Was that merely immense power? That was unparalleled, earth-shattering power. Dean Yuan of the Lonko Academy closed the file and said, "Prepare the car. I need to go to the Fangwu University of Science and Technology." "What?" The secretary was stunned. "Dean, you're going to investigate in person." "Investigate what?" Dean Yuan glanced at the secretary. "There's no need for an investigation. Just come up with some excuse to brush it off. There's no way we'll find anything." The secretary was even more confused. "Then why are you going?" Dean Yuan didn't answer. When it came to poaching talent, one had to go in person to show sincerity. A 19-year-old student who built a laser gun and exploded a satellite. That wasn't just talent. It was a freak of nature, an absolute monster of a genius. "Just get the car ready. Also, I want to see the file of a student from the Fangwu University of Science and Technology. His name is Gao Yang." "Yes, sir." Within half an hour, Dean Yuan was on a plane heading straight for the Fangwu University of Science and Technology in the dead of night. He also saw Gao Yang's file, and his brows instantly furrowed. Then he broke into a smile. He actually got a probationary suspension. The secretary looked at Dean Yuan with some confusion. What was going on? He had read the file. A probationary suspension would follow the file for life. It was a stain that would be hard to erase. Why was Dean Yuan still smiling? In the dead of night, Dean Yuan's car stopped in front of the Fangwu University of Science and Technology. He checked the time, 9:30. Still time. The secretary watched Dean Yuan get out of the car and run toward the campus, bewildered, even more puzzled. What was up with Dean Yuan today? He was acting so out of character. Without notifying the university at all, he had sneaked in. And he seemed to be in a hurry. Under the secretary's astonished gaze, Dean Yuan grabbed a bicycle. The secretary was truly dumbfounded. There were cars inside the campus, so why ride a bike? But he had no choice. He could only pedal his bike and follow behind Dean Yuan. Dean Yuan pedaled all the way to the library, checked the time again. Exactly. He handed the bike to the secretary, took a deep breath, and walked into the library. At this hour, the library was already quite quiet with few people around. But Dean Yuan knew in advance that it closed at 10:30. Entering the library, his gaze swept quickly across the room, and soon he spotted Gao Yang had a stack of books in front of him and was reading intently. Dean Yuan had seen Gao Yang's photo, confirmed the target, and walked over quickly. He didn't disturb him immediately. First, he observed. Looking at the books on the table, the top one was Sniper Rifle Design and Manufacturing. Not a book about lasers. Dean Yuan picked it up. It was mostly about reverse engineering different models of sniper rifles. Just then Ruo walked over and pushed a cup of coffee to Gao Yang's hand. Dean Yuan glanced at Ruo, a thoughtful expression on his face. After Ruo left, he found an opening to start a conversation. Is she your girlfriend? Gao Yang didn't say a word, still reading with his head down. Dean Yuan felt a bit awkward and raised his voice slightly. Hello, classmate. Gao Yang finally looked up, glanced at Dean Yuan, silently picked up his book and moved to a corner. He just wanted to read without being disturbed. Dean Yuan watched Gao Yang walk to the corner, stunned. Such focus. But geniuses were often like. He stopped beating around the bush, strode over, and said bluntly, Classmate Gao Yang, I came here for you. Gao Yang finally put down his book, took a sip of coffee, and asked, You are? Why didn't you let me know in advance? I would have prepared a proper welcome. Dean Yuan turned around, his expression darkening. President gone. Why didn't you let me know in advance? I would have prepared a proper welcome. Dean Yuan turned around, his expression darkening. President gone. The president sat down beside Gao Yang with a forced smile, looking at Dean Yuan. Your nose is really sharp. Dean Yuan knew that today's task of recruiting Gao Yang had become much harder, but no matter how difficult, he had to try. Gao Yang could feel the tension, but he didn't leave. Since they came for him, he couldn't escape. Dean Yuan stood up, extended his hand to Gao Yang, and said, Dean Yuan of the 𝂃 Academy. At that moment, Gao Yang was a bit stunned. What was going on? The dean of the 𝂃 Academy had come for him. The 𝂃 Academy, the largest research institution in Longwa. Its strength lay in having 3 colleges, over 200 research institutes, and over 200 observation stations covering every industry and field. In Longwa, the 𝂃 Academy could pretty much do whatever it wanted, and its dean had come to find him. What had he done to deserve this? The laser gun. Gao Yang shook Dean Yuan's hand. Dean Yuan got straight to the point. I'd like to invite you to study at the 𝂃 Academy. Bang! President Gon slammed the table and stood up. Yuan, what do you mean by that? Dean Yuan looked at President Gon. What do you mean? A genius like Gao Yang, and instead of teaching him according to his abilities, you gave him a probationary suspension. President Gon couldn't refute the fact. The suspension was real. The suspension has been revoked. Even if it's revoked, it will always remain in his file. Dean Yuan turned to Gao Yang. The 𝂃 Academy has the largest collection of books in the country. You can read as much as you want, and we can even gather any books you need. Besides that, we have the most advanced laboratories in the country available for your use at any time. We can even build a research institute tailored. President Gon took a deep breath, his expression softening as he looked at Gao Yang. The school's best laboratories are also at your disposal anytime. Plus, we have many major projects underway. For example, the largest superbrain in Longwa. You can join any project that interests you. Gao Yang was dumbfounded. He knew why Dean Yuan had come, to poach him. A top-tier lab costing hundreds of millions just for him alone. Dean Yuan glanced at President Gon and continued, in addition, there will be resource allocation. For any project you want to research, just ask for the funding. As long as it's not too outrageous, the money will be approved directly. We can even set up a dedicated research fund for you. The first installment may be a bit modest. How about 100 million? Gao Yang was stunned. 100 million. Even though it couldn't be used arbitrarily as research funding, it was still staggering. Funding a project with 100 million was one thing, giving it to him personally was another. This was money given to him. He could even buy a sports car with it and study the car's performance. President Gon was also stunned. Dean Yuan was really pulling out all the stops. Giving a student that much money. But then he thought of Gao Yang's laser cannon, a technology that couldn't be bought for 100 million, let alone 100 million. 10 billion, 100 billion would be. Gritting his teeth, he said, set up a research foundation immediately exclusive to Gao Yang. The first installment, 120 million. Dean Yuan winced internally. Old Gon was really willing to spend. He fell silent, thinking about what other advantages he had. The biggest advantage of the 𝂃 Academy was its sheer size. It had research institutes in almost every field. The Fangwu University of Science and Technology, on the other hand, specialized only in weapons. The two institutions actually had a close relationship with technology, almost shared. Otherwise, the laser gun test wouldn't have been conducted at the Light Weapons Research Institute under the 𝂃 Academy. Additionally, graduates from both sides could be mutually recruited, but close ties and competition were not mutually exclusive at all. Dean Yuan reasoned with Gao Yang, saying, the Dragon Science Academy is your best destination. If you go there, you can research various technologies without being confined to application. In terms of application, you can pass the technology to the Defense Research Institute or to other researchers to apply it. At the National Defense University of Science and Technology, your research direction is limited to weapons. President Gon said coldly, what's wrong with researching weapons? Without defense technology, where would security and peace come from? Dean Yuan leveraged the situation. The Dragon Science Academy has many weapon equipment research institutes. Whatever you want to study, we can provide the latest technology for reference. President Gon still did not give up. We can provide that too. Dean Yuan looked at Gao Yang and raised the stakes. I can also invite your girlfriend over and give her high treatment. President Gon also grew angry, though he didn't know where Gao Yang's girlfriend came from. Your girlfriend can also receive preferential treatment at our school. Even if you two break up, I'll introduce my granddaughter to you." Gao Yang was startled. Looking at the two who were at odds, he quickly said, "I don't have a girlfriend, and I choose to stay at the National Defense University of Science and Technology." Dean Yuan saw Gao Yang's determination and asked with some confusion, "Why?" Gao Yang had already grown accustomed to the current environment. Going to the Dragon Science Academy might offer better conditions, but he would have to readjust. As for research, he relied mainly on the system, not on genuine study. So there was no difference between the Dragon Science Academy and the National Defense. Moreover, he wanted to experience college life a bit. If he went to the Dragon Science Academy, he would have to graduate immediately. But Gao Yang didn't say that the teachers and classmates here are all very kind to me, and am used to reading in the library. President Gan laughed. He also saw Gao Yang's determination. Old Yuan, why not try to persuade him again? Dean Yuan didn't waste further effort, but still said, "The doors of the Dragon Science Academy are always open to you. If you change your mind, or if you want to come after graduation, you're welcome anytime. Also, I'd like to see your laser weapon." President Gan said with a smile, "Tomorrow morning, we'll conduct a weapon test. If you're free, come and take a look. It'll definitely be there." Dean Yuan left quickly. President Gan let out a sigh of relief, turned to Gao Yang, and said, "It's good that you don't have a girlfriend. I'll send you my granddaughter's WeChat later." Gao Yang waved his hand. "Forget about the girlfriend. When can you fulfill the research funds and laboratory you promised me?" President Gan felt a pang. "Within 3 days." The president left. A smile unconsciously crept onto Gao Yang's lips. Having his own exclusive laboratory and ample funds to use was incredibly satisfying. Dean Yuan's visit this time had secured benefits for him. He took a sip of coffee and continued reading. At the Light Weapons Research Institute, in the shooting range, technicians were quickly setting up the area. A group of researchers who had rested overnight had already arrived. Professor Li held the box containing the laser gun, waiting quietly. As a military vehicle arrived, everyone looked. The first to get out was President Gan, then Dean Yuan, and finally the main character Gao Yang. Gao Yang was holding a book in his hand, standing out among a group of elderly people with an average age of 60. The shooting range gate closed, and only then did Professor Li take out the laser gun. Dean Yuan quickly stepped forward, examining the laser gun. Just by its appearance, Dean Yuan was amazed. This laser gun was truly beautiful. Most importantly, it was small. A device no more than 30 centimeters long had actually blown up a satellite. So terrifying. After fumbling for a moment, Dean Yuan handed the laser gun to the technician, who then pushed it to the edge of the shooting range, waiting for the test to begin. Before the test began, the technicians handed out sunglasses to everyone. The sunglasses were specially made slightly dark. Once worn, it felt as if the sky had darkened and things were not. The staff secured the laser gun and turned around to say, "Test preparation complete. We can start the test." Professor Li directly said, "Do final checks." Several technicians stared at the equipment in front of them, confirming that the data collection devices had no major issues. Fire. The technician pressed the switch and a brilliant laser. 100 meters away, a steel plate was melted through. Then 200 meters away, another steel plate was also melted through. The arrangement of steel plates continued up to 3 kilometers away. In just 2 seconds, the steel plate 3 kilometers away was also completely melted. The laser gun shut down. Dean Yuan removed his sunglasses, staring blankly at the long line of steel plates, at the holes, at the molten steel still dripping from the edges of the holes. He could hardly believe it. The power was far greater than he had anticipated. Those were steel plates, instantly melted through. It was known that the Dragon Science Academy had a dedicated laser research institute that would require long exposure times to melt through steel plates. Even laser cutting machines at a distance of 2 centimeters and extremely high temperatures still required high-pressure gas jets to cut metal. Gao Yang's laser cannon had directly blasted through steel plates. With this power, let alone piercing Starlink satellites from the ground, even piercing a space station was possible. As he was thinking, Dean Yuan heard a professor's excited tremolo in his ear. "This laser is not as bright as last time. The loss along the laser path has been reduced." Dean Yuan was bewildered. Last time. While he was still dazed, the researchers excitedly rushed to the test site to examine the just recorded data. Dean Yuan also rushed over, disregarding his dignity. Before he even got close, he heard exclamations. Maximum temperature 50,000. The instant temperature on the steel plate 3 kilometers away exceeds 45,000 degrees. Laser loss reduced, range extended. Estimated range over 200 kilometers. Continue testing. Dean Yuan squeezed into the crowd, but the crowd had already dispersed to begin the second test. Before the test started, some people still cared about Dean Yuan. Now, they only had eyes for the laser gun. Dean Yuan didn't mind. He held the sheet from the first test, gazing at it absent-mindedly. It was almost unbelievable. The power was too terrifying, surpassing all current laser weapons in the world by far. With such a small gun having such immense power, if it were enlarged into a cannon, how terrifying would it be? How terrifying would that be? Then he saw the second sheet, the results from the previous test. 2 test results, 2 laser guns. How could there be such a huge improvement in such a short time? Suppressing his shock, Dean Yuan turned to look at Gao Yang. Gao Yang was reading a book. He had only cared about the first test, for the rest he paid no attention. A 300-fold amplified laser gun, just curious enough to come see its power. After seeing it, since it wasn't convenient to leave, he took the opportunity to read a bit. Dean Yuan felt even more admiration and regret. If President Gan hadn't arrived in time yesterday, he would have already secured Gao Yang. Returning to his seat, he continued watching the tests. Each test needed to be run several times, and the group of researchers had prepared many different testing methods for this laser gun. Apart from using brute force for stability testing, all other testing methods were employed. The more they tested, the more alarmed they became. The power was twice as strong as the previous laser gun. The military personnel grew increasingly satisfied. This device's power was immense, and if it could be turned into a true combat-ready piece of equipment, its practical effectiveness would undoubtedly be extraordinary. However, this laser gun was not yet ready for the battlefield. First, there was the trailing wire. Could one really ask about the nearest power outlet before heading into battle? This was a matter of energy supply. Then there was the fact that this laser gun was still an experimental model. Could it be mass-produced outside the lab? But these were all minor issues. As long as the technology was in hand, these problems could easily be overcome. After this test, President Yuan realized a very important point. Before coming, he had already regarded Gao Yang as a super prodigy. Now he knew he had still underestimated him. A talent like this was no longer confined to a single research institute. It had ascended to the level of all humanity. At this age, Gao Yang had already achieved so much. What would he accomplish in a few more years? If he lived to 70 or 80, the entire world would likely undergo earth-shattering transformations. President Yuan walked up to Gao Yang, proactively took out his business card, and handed it over. If you need anything, just call. Whatever you require, if you ask, I will do my utmost to satisfy. Whether it's resources, materials, or even people to assist you. Just name it, and he'll see it done. Gao Yang cared about few things. He already had resources and whatnot. But what piqued his curiosity was the laser cannon that had blown up a satellite in the news. That laser cannon making all the headlines yesterday. Could I go take a look? President Yuan froze, staring at Gao Yang in bewilderment. What? That laser cannon? Wasn't it fired by your laser gun? Gao Yang was puzzled. How could that be possible? The laser gun currently only has its main body. Though powerful enough, it had no chance of hitting a satellite. President Yuan looked at the laser gun. He had seen its power, but there was no targeting system. Yet the problem was, judging by the trajectory of the laser, the launching point was exactly the Light Weapon Research Institute. Professor Li was confused. A laser hitting a satellite. The remaining researchers shared the same confusion. Their phones had been sealed since the laser gun test, completely cut off from the outside world. They had no contact with the outside, and even those with phones hadn't bothered to check the news. They had no idea what had happened. President Yuan silently took out his phone, opened the news, and handed it over. Professor Li looked first, his eyes widening, then passed the phone to the others. When we were testing, there was an accident. The laser gun fired a shot into the sky. Could it be? The others' eyes also went wide. Such incredible luck. 1 second of error, and it destroyed a satellite. The researchers found it unbelievable, as satellites in orbit move extremely fast. To have hit one, they might as well buy a lottery ticket. And the satellite that got hit, its luck was truly abysmal. A careful check of the data showed that the time and location of the satellite's destruction matched their shooting error exactly. Then came the shock. The first weakened laser gun's power was actually this immense. It had shot down a Starlink satellite 300 kilometers above the ground. Gao Yang had originally wanted to see other laser weapons, but now he knew he was the cause. What do we do? President Yuan laughed. What to do? It has nothing to do with you. Even if you shot down all the Starlink satellites, it'd be fine. A high-ranking military officer chuckled. The military will issue a statement saying it was a failed test firing. As for you, student Gao, you bear no responsibility. You'll get all the credit and rewards you do. The officer continued with a smile. Just make sure the laser weapons application is arranged as soon as possible. All right. Gao Yang nodded. With the technology in hand, designing practical weaponry later wouldn't be difficult. The military personnel left satisfied. President Yuan was also about to leave. After taking 2 steps, he suddenly paused, turned back to Principal Gan, and said, in the upcoming military equipment design exercise, the laser gun must not be used. Principal Gan laughed. What are you afraid of? The laser gun can't be used in actual combat, yet anyway. It's not like we can drag an extension cord to the exercise. President Yuan chuckled too, then got into his car and left. Principal Gan took Gao Yang into his car, heading back to the school first. Sitting in the car, Gao Yang asked curiously, design exercise competition. Principal Gan explained with a smile, there's always been competition between several schools. This design exercise compares individual soldier equipment, Lonka University versus the National Defense University of Science and Technology. Each will prepare gear for a special operations squad. Then the two squads will engage in individual combat. This was Gao Yang's first time hearing about such a competition. It sounded intriguing. Testing equipment through live combat would reveal results instantly. Principal Gan could tell Gao Yang was interested and smiled. Want to watch the action? I could let you join the competition. Gao Yang hesitated slightly. Would it be troublesome? Principal Gan elaborated, the design competition won't take up much time. You don't need to design weapons yourself. Each piece of individual gear has dedicated designers. You just need to provide ideas and guidance. Leave the rest to the students. Gao Yang became interested, not so much in winning, but because it was real combat. Combat he might influence. And it wouldn't demand much of it. Seeing Gao Yang clearly intrigued, Principal Gan added, in recent years we've often had competitions with the 𝂃 Institute. Mainly to stimulate students' creativity. Both sides doctoral candidates and above go all out, often producing designs that are truly eye-catching. Especially with the two schools' different design philosophies, you can definitely experience the contrast. Gao Yang nodded. He did want to have some fun. Even just watching a close-quarters exercise would be enjoyable. Alright, I'll give it a try. The principal smiled and explained this equipment design exercise focuses on individual combat, so the designs are mainly for personal weapons. Two squads will fight using weapons designed by students from each school. If the performance is good, the designed weapons might become official equipment. Gao Yang nodded but didn't take the last sentence seriously. It sounded nice, but nobody really believed it. Every official change of equipment required countless meetings and a long time. After all, replacing standard weapons en masse costs a fortune. Take the Eagle as an example. They've only done major weapon replacements 4 times in 200 years. Yet the variety of developed weapons is enormous. Dragon Country was similar. They had just replaced individual weapons not long ago, so there was practically no chance of another. So Gao Yang's goal was simply to win. He felt no pressure as there was no difficulty. With the system in place, losing would be the greatest absurdity and the most outrageous joke. Even if the system were gone now, the scientific knowledge from the laser gun's 10,000-fold amplification would still let him easily win this exercise. He just needed to figure out how to secure the victory. Upon returning to the school, Gao Yang first acquainted himself with the exercise design competition. Undeniably, the inter-school competition was brilliantly conceived. Any weapon developed by students, as long as it passed stability tests, could be directly deployed on the battlefield. Moreover, before the two sides engaged in battle, neither knew what weapons the other was using. Weaponry remained classified and victory or defeat was decided on the battlefield. Such practical combat also served as a powerful incentive for the students. A glance at previous competitions revealed that each year had a specific objective. For instance, last year's equipment design had to address extreme cold environments. The year before that, the challenge was a multifunctional helmet. As Gao Yang reviewed the competition records, he found them utterly captivating. The students from both schools were exceptional. The tactical helmet designed by 𝂃 Academy students incorporated over a dozen technologies, each representing a distinct research direction. In contrast, the National University of Defense Technology students placed greater emphasis on true combat efficacy. Their helmet featured an anti-jamming system with all functions rendered more stable and the critical capabilities pushed to the cutting edge. Both designs were sufficiently outstanding. The final improved helmet was later adopted for small-scale deployment by special forces. This achievement also became a crowning glory for the participating students from both institutions. Gao Yang continued perusing other materials. After a thorough review, he realized this was a game for prodigies. No wonder he had never heard of it before. Even within the school, only a handful of students could participate. To enter such a competition, one had to excel at school and win awards in various contests just to learn of its existence. It was a team composed entirely of geniuses, but even so they paled in comparison to Gao Yang, who was practically cheating. Gao Yang returned to school and first contacted the competition team. With only half a month remaining, he needed to assess the team's situation. He made a phone call in advance asking the members to wait for him in the meeting room. The design competition had its own dedicated laboratory and meeting room. In the meeting room, 10 people were already seated. Before Gao Yang arrived, someone remarked, "Captain, we've been working for months and are almost done. And now we get a temporary captain." Chun Hong, the former captain, responded, "I don't know the details, nor do I know much about Gao Yang. But aside from the director's call, my own advisor called me and told me to seize this opportunity. He said that the chance to study under him might come only once in a lifetime." The group was stunned. Chun Hong's advisor was a titan in the field, a professor who supervised postgraduate. That even such a luminary would speak so highly of Gao Yang only heightened their anticipation. Who exactly was this person? Half an hour passed in a flash, and Gao Yang walked into the meeting room. Looking at the 10 individuals seated upright, Gao Yang got straight to the point. "Did you bring your design documents?" "Yes," Chun Hong replied, handing them over voluntarily. The others followed suit. Gao Yang began reviewing their designs. They were comprehensive, covering pistols, rifles, sniper rifles, bulletproof vests, grenades, tactical helmets, and even cold weapons. The 10 had produced a complete set of individual soldier equipment. Gao Yang skimmed through them rapidly. After finishing, he shook his head after a long pause. They all fall short. It was evident that everyone's expressions tensed up. How could one glance reveal anything of substance? Gao Yang paid no heed to their thoughts. His gaze swept across the room. Your equipment designs do show improvements over standard gear and have their merits. But to win the competition, that's not enough. There's no standout advantage. As he spoke, he picked up the first document. Whose pistol design is this? Mine, said a female student. Gao Yang scanned the blueprint again, then quickly made revisions on it. In under 5 minutes, he handed it back. Try modifying it along these lines. The girl took the document. Initially dismissive, she froze, then studied it closely. After reading it, she looked up at Gao Yang as if she had seen a ghost. She originally thought her design was excellent, but now she realized she was nothing but a frog at the bottom of a well. Following Gao Yang's line of thought, her pistol could increase firepower while significantly reducing recoil. How could this be so absurd? By the time she finished reviewing his suggestions, Gao Yang had already sketched the second revision. Whose rifle design? Mine. Chun Hong raised his hand. Gao Yang handed it over. As Chun Hong examined it, his expression shifted. As the former captain, he had harbored some resentment over Gao Yang's sudden appointment and his own displacement. But those grievances were buried deep. Now, however, he was convinced, and he finally understood his advisor's words. What Gao Yang had casually revised was an entire league above Chun Hong's original design. This approach provided him with immense inspiration. He could now increase the rate of fire while simultaneously improving stability. Having Gao Yang as captain was a tremendous. The remaining 8 people watched the transformation in the 2. Curiosity peaked. After receiving Gao Yang's modification suggestions, their curiosity turned into shock and By the time Gao Yang had written out improvement ideas for everyone, all 10 were wholeheartedly convinced. The revisions alone had already yielded them enormous gains. Gao Yang stood up. The meeting ends here. Continue with your work. The 10 immediately rose, their demeanor respectful. Captain, take care. Gao Yang walked out of the meeting room and glanced at the somewhat cluttered laboratory. They'll get you a better lab later. With that, he left for the library. The 10 exchanged bewildered looks. As students, merely having a lab was already incredibly fortunate, and Gao Yang still found it unsatisfactory. This lab was already quite good. Many doctoral candidates didn't have such conditions. Unless they were doctoral students working on a professor's project, who else could get their own lab? A female student gazed at Gao Yang's retreating figure. Captain, where did this genius? Chun Hong waved his hand. Don't call me captain. Gao Yang is our captain. No matter where he's from, we're going to win this time. Let's get to work. The 10 immediately threw themselves into their tasks. First, they needed to thoroughly understand the ideas Gao Yang had provided. Gao Yang, meanwhile, was not idle. He headed straight for the library. He immersed himself in reading. The guidance he had given could at most raise the exercise's victory rate by 50%. To secure an absolute win, he would have to rely on himself. Only half a month remained until the exercise. He had to read intensively to recharge his second amplification opportunity. Gao Yang returned to a life of reading with such dedication that he forgot to eat and sleep. As he devoured book after book, his charging progress accelerated. He paid no attention to the outside world. Meanwhile, the Long Kingdom authorities issued a response to the laser strike that had destroyed a satellite. It was the Dragon Kingdom's military that responded to the online news inquiry. During the laser weapon test, a malfunction occurred, and the target was locked incorrectly. This was the response, brief, direct, and assertive. Blowing up another nation's satellite without even an apology, just a mere malfunction. This response caused an uproar worldwide. For the upper echelons of major powers, the Dragon Kingdom's reply essentially announced that they possessed a devastatingly powerful laser weapon capable of striking low Earth orbit from the ground. This was terrifying. It meant that once war began, all satellites in low Earth orbit would be directly obliterated. At that point, the communication devices of most factions would be rendered useless as bricks. The armies of major powers would all be blinded. Furthermore, a laser weapon capable of hitting satellites could certainly intercept missiles. This was true interception, not the kind of PP-driven performance by the bald eagle. If it could hit missiles, then what about aircraft? Surely it could too. Coupled with the Dragon Kingdom's nature, they only show what is outdated. This so-called malfunction might actually be their discontinued model. That would be terrifying. The Dragon Kingdom had better hope it was truly a mistake, otherwise the consequences would be dire. This chain of reasoning sent a cold shiver down the spines of major powers. The Dragon Kingdom's progress had been too immense. Almost simultaneously, all major powers began desperately investigating the existence of a laser weapon, while ordinary people were also shocked by the news. The Dragon Kingdom's citizens felt a mix of awe and delight. Though many had suspected it was their own weapon, official acknowledgement was a different matter altogether. Everyone was immensely exhilarated, especially those who had followed the news closely and listened to many pundits analyzing that such a weapon didn't exist, that it was likely a hoax or imported from overseas. They had genuinely felt distressed back then, but now they were walking with their heads held high. They directly silenced the pundits with their arguments. In contrast, ordinary people overseas were demanding accountability, having shot down a satellite and admitted it shouldn't compensation be paid. But no matter how loudly they clamored online, the initially aggressive bald eagle had fallen silent. Their goal had been to ascertain the laser's status, now that they knew any further entanglements would only bring humiliation. Because they had once pioneered laser weapon proposals, and now the Dragon Kingdom could use them to strike satellites, while they could only dazzle cameras. Ding! Congratulations, host, you have received a 10,000-fold amplification opportunity. In the library, Gao Yang abruptly lifted his head. 10 days. After working tirelessly on the 10th day since taking over the exchange team, the amplification opportunity was fully charged. Standing up, Gao Yang headed straight for the laboratory. The best laboratory at the National University of Defense Technology was now exclusively his. Entering, Gao Yang called Chen Hong. Within half an hour, Chen Hong arrived with the entire 10-person team, carrying large bags, looking utterly bewildered as they stood before the lab door, hesitant to enter. A sterile lab, the highest-tier facility of the university. Could they enter? They weren't qualified. Yet how could this be possible? Such a lab would require an application even for a doctoral supervisor to use. Was Gao Yang playing tricks on them? Amid their stunned gazes, Gao Yang stepped out. What are you standing there for? Change your clothes and come in. Chen Hong and the others stared dumbfounded. This. Are we going to manufacture guns here? Any problem? Chen Hong stammered. We don't need. Our previous lab was good enough. Chen Hong felt like a country bumpkin. He had been living in a thatched hut, and suddenly Gao Yang descended like a divine soldier, leading him to the imperial palace and pointing to the emperor's bedchamber, saying, "You sleep here." He dared not enter. Stop dawdling. There are only 2 days left before the weapons need to be delivered to the combat teams participating in the exercise. Come in. With that, Gao Yang turned and walked. The group exchanged glances, gritted their teeth, and said, "Let's go in." After changing clothes and cleaning their belongings, they entered the laboratory. As soon as they entered, someone exclaimed, "This is a high-precision machine tool with an error margin of 0.05 microns, the best in the Dragon Kingdom." Holy shit. That device is a custom model reportedly quoted at $30 million US. I saw that device in my professor's lab. It was about 1 million. Different. The appearance is similar, but the parameters are different, at least 10 times more expensive. The group crept around cautiously, looking around, trembling. With so much equipment, even scratching the paint would be more than they could afford to pay for. Gao Yang, standing at the design station, looked up at the group, walking with hunched heads. Don't waste time. Familiarize yourselves with the lab quickly and start working. Chen Hong tried to steady himself. Let's all give it our best. They took a deep breath, cautiously found places, unpacked their gear, and began design. Seeing everyone busy, Gao Yang continued with his own work. He wasn't rushing to design the competition weapons. Instead, he first designed he planned to amplify the competition weapons later, which couldn't be done in front of the exercise design team. In contrast, the laser weapons design was urgent. Without a suitable power source, the laser gun couldn't be realized, so it had to be a laser cannon. Moreover, the laser cannon was more reliable. It didn't require power considerations, and enlarging the laser emitter could yield immense power with lower demands on parts. In a laser gun, component errors couldn't exceed 0.1 microns. High precision meant higher failure rates, and mass production was impossible. Only top-tier labs could achieve that. But when scaled up, an error margin of 1 centimeter was acceptable, making it easier to manufacture and less prone to damage. After completing the laser cannon design, Gao Yang also designed a vehicle-mounted laser cannon, an aircraft-borne laser cannon, and a tank laser cannon. By 8 in the evening, all designs were finished. He called Professor Li and sent over the designs for several laser weapons. There was a dedicated facility to manufacture these designs, so Gao Yang didn't need to do it himself. That night, after everyone else had left, he began considering which weapon to amplify next. High-tech weapons like the laser gun had too many restrictions even after amplification. He needed to amplify conventional gunpowder weapons, ordinary firearm, pistols, rifles, submachine guns, and sniper rifles. Gao Yang had read extensively on firearms. His gaze fell on a table where a sniper rifle lay. Sniper rifles were excellent, long-range, high power. He decided to amplify a sniper rifle. Its construction was simple. In half an hour, he built one. Length 1.2 meters, range 120 meters, high accuracy, weight only 8 G per kilograms, magazine capacity 12 rounds. A standard sniper rifle, but with the system, even an ordinary invention could become godlike after amplification. He just didn't know which aspect would be randomly amplified. If it were an increase in range, that would be hard to imagine. With a range of 1,200 meters, a minimum increase of 100 times would mean 120,000 meters. If he got the maximum increase, 10,000 times the range would directly reach 12 million meters, 12,000 kilometers. A sniper rifle that could be fired from the North Pole to hit the equator. That's just insane. After waiting for a moment, Gao Yang was a bit surprised. The system hadn't triggered yet. Could it be that a sniper rifle didn't count as an invention? But this was the sniper rifle he had designed. Was the sniper rifle not qualified? Recalling the last test, Gao Yang had first tested the power of the laser gun before the system responded. Did he need to test it? Gao Yang first called Professor Li to request ammunition and access to the shooting range for testing. Professor Li was a bit surprised. You want to test a gun? Yeah, the dean asked me to join the exercise research group, so I designed a gun. Professor Li nodded. You're young, you don't need to act so mature. You really should participate in more activities, make some friends, and preferably find a girlfriend. Otherwise, college would be wasted. I'm sending your laser cannon blueprints to the factory right now, so I can't take you to the range. They'll call the range, you can go directly there. They have all types of ammunition. Okay. Professor Li hung up, not thinking much of it, just testing a gun. Gao Yang immediately headed to the shooting range. In the dead of night, the range didn't even have a single bird. The staff member set up the target for Gao Yang. Sniper rifles have quite a lot of power. I suggest I test it for you. No need. Gao Yang had fired guns during military training, but he had never used a sniper rifle. What man doesn't enjoy playing with guns? He lay down, aimed at the target 200 meters away, and pulled the trigger. Boom. A loud bang. Gao Yang felt as if someone had punched his shoulder. It hurt. The staff member glanced at the device. Miss. Just as Gao Yang was about to speak, a prompt sounded in his mind. Host has developed a sniper rifle. Amplification is available. Would you like to use one amplification opportunity? Gao Yang ignored the system. He couldn't amplify now, or he would do it when he got back to the lab. For now, it was time to play with the gun. He fired 10 rounds in a row, all missing. The staff member couldn't bear to watch. How about I give it a try? No need. Gao Yang switched shoulders and continued. After another 10 rounds, Gao Yang looked at the target, now moved to 50 meters. How could it be so off? Was the sight not adjusted? But he had made the gun himself. That was impossible. Gao Yang gave up on firing more. He picked up the rifle and went straight back to the lab. Closing the lab door, he immersed his mind into the system. Use the amplification opportunity. Amplify the sniper rifle. The next moment, a phantom-like large wheel appeared before Gao Yang. He spun the wheel, his eyes wide open, hoping for a 10,000-fold increase. Even though the current technology couldn't meet the manufacturing standards, the basic industrial level would definitely improve. He could gradually bring it out later. For now, the more multiplier he got, the better. The wheel spun slower and slower, still far from the 10,000 mark. Clack. The wheel stopped at 4,399 times. That multiplier was acceptable, but he wondered which aspect it would amplify. The next moment, a system prompt sounded in Gao Yang's mind. Ding, congratulations to the host for developing the sniper rifle. Obtained a 4,399-fold increase in accuracy. Gao Yang was puzzled. Accuracy? How could that be amplified? If the original error was 1 centimeter, would it be amplified to 1 micron? What difference? The next moment, all the equipment in the lab started working. At the same time, the sniper rifle he had just made was disassembled and began to be remanufactured. The process was still very fast. All the equipment seemed to be sped up, while a large number of parts were manufactured and then assembled together. A sniper rifle over 1.5 meters long appeared before Gao Yang. Ding, based on current equipment, only a 600-fold accuracy sniper rifle can be produced. Then a massive influx of memories flooded into Gao Yang's mind. Technical memories about sniper rifle accuracy. The memories were numerous and clear. The system's understanding of accuracy was roughly equivalent to precision, hitting the target. So the gun's accuracy was excellent. Good accuracy was usually used to describe a person, but here it described the gun because it could auto-aim. The grip and stock could move automatically. Through this mechanism, it achieved auto-aiming. The gun also had a high-definition camera and a processor capable of simple lead calculation. Additionally, to ensure the target was hit, even after the gun aimed, the sniper rifle's range was increased to 3 kilometers. Basically, once locked by the system, there was no escape. At the same time, to ensure accuracy, the recoil was reduced. After reading all the knowledge, Gao Yang opened his eyes. He picked up the sniper rifle and examined it carefully. The black sniper rifle now had dense scale-like patterns. Before firing, these patterns would open forward. After firing, they would suddenly close, using this impact to counter the rifle's recoil. But the design was really cool. So cool that Gao Yang couldn't put it down. It was as if the gun had a life, and every shot was like a breath. The weight increased to 12 pounds, a bit heavier than before, but not a big issue. At the front, there was also a wide-angle lens to ensure more enemies could be spotted. With this design, he was unstoppable. With a gun like this, how could he lose the upcoming exercise? It was impossible to lose. Gao Yang picked up the rifle and went straight back to the shooting range. He couldn't wait to test this gun. He left the lab and headed directly to the range. The range staff hadn't gone off duty. It was the same technician who had accompanied Gao Yang earlier. Seeing Gao Yang again, he asked, "Do you want me to test it?" "No, I'll do it myself." Then, they'll move the target to 30 meters. 20 meters. Gao Yang glanced at the staff member. 20 meters. 200 meters. Move it to 200 meters. The staff member nodded with a smile, moved the target to 200 meters, and returned to Gao Yang's side, ready to begin. Gao Yang took out the sniper rifle and began to adjust it. The staff member stared at the rifle stunned. What a cool gun. And so long. It must have been over 1.5 meters. Sleek, yet well-designed, it looked stunning at first glance. The scale-like patterns on the body only added to its coolness. Gao Yang raised the muzzle, aimed at the distant target, and pulled the trigger. Bang! A loud sound, and the bullet left the barrel. But Gao Yang felt no pain in his shoulder. The recoil had been greatly reduced. The technician beside him was dumbfounded, looking at the result. Ten-ring. Just moments ago, Gao Yang had missed 20 times in a row. He had missed even at 50 meters, yet now at 200 meters, he hit a bullseye. It must have been pure luck. The technician nodded. That shot was excellent. Keep it up. Gao Yang smiled, no longer lying on the ground. He stood up directly and shouldered the rifle. The technician was stunned, standing while holding a sniper rifle, and not even in the correct shooting posture. This could easily injure oneself. The technician hurried forward to stop him, but before he could approach Gao Yang had already pulled the trigger at the distant target. Bang! Another loud crack echoed. The technician was dumbfounded. Gao Yang's body only swayed slightly. Was this a martial artist? Then came the announcement from the system, bullseye. The technician's eyes widened in disbelief. A bullseye like that. A sharpshooter. But Gao Yang had missed all 20 previous shots. Just as he was thinking this, Gao Yang remained standing and fired continuously. To test the rifle's rate of fire. Theoretically, this rifle could fire 2 rounds per second. But Gao Yang wasn't a professional marksman. He couldn't achieve the maximum rate of fire. He exerted maximum speed, emptying the remaining 10 rounds in 10 seconds. Still, this rate of fire was quite fast for a sniper rifle. The recoil was remarkably small. The most unbelievable thing was the accuracy. The staff member nearby had already widened his eyes. Using a sniper rifle like an assault automatic fire, and all 12 consecutive shots were bullseyes. So monstrous. Gao Yang swapped the magazine and looked at the staff member. Changed the target. Distance, 500 meters. The staff member opened his mouth. 500 meters was already a long distance, requiring a real marksman to hit. An amateur at this range would almost certainly miss. Nevertheless, he complied with Gao Yang's request. He activated the equipment around the target, placed 500 meters away. You can start now. Gao Yang changed position, raised the rifle without aiming, and pulled the trigger directly. Bang! Bullseye. The staff member's mouth fell open again. Bullseye. And on the first shot. What did this mean? An absolute sharpshooter. Immediately after, the system's continuous report sounded, bullseye, 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 bullseye. All 12 rounds were expended. Gao Yang glanced at the results, then looked at the staff member who had fallen into self-doubt. Excuse me, 1,000-meter target. The staff member stared blankly upward, then mechanically activated the equipment for the 1,000-meter target. The 1,000-meter target had usage conditions. After all, at this distance, only professionals could attempt it. But 12 consecutive bullseyes at 500 meters qualified. Gao Yang still stood there, and under the staff member's bewildered gaze, he pulled the trigger. Bang! Bullseye. The staff member listened to the mechanical voice report, opening his mouth. This is impossible. A bullseye at 1,000 meters on the first shot at night. How was it done? Gao Yang glanced at the staff member, suddenly released his left hand, held the rifle with his right hand alone, and fired. Bang! Bullseye. The staff member was once again stunned. Holding a sniper rifle with one hand, hitting a target 1,000 meters away, and still a bullseye. Was this a sharpshooter? This was a monster. Gao Yang only showed off for one shot. Holding a 12-gauge rifle with one hand was tiring. He switched to both hands and fired continuously. The staff member wore an expression as if he had seen a ghost, because every shot was a bullseye. With such skill, why not compete in the Olympics? Just as he was thinking, Gao Yang's voice sounded again. Do me a favor, prepare a 2,000-meter target. The staff member was stunned. The range only goes up to 1,500 meters. Then prepare a 1,500-meter target. At 1,500 meters, the bullet would take time to travel and would also drop. Additionally, the wind speed at the current location and hundreds of meters away had to be considered. Normally, only a sharpshooter could use this distance. Gao Yang fired. Bang! Bullseye. The staff member was numb. Another bullseye. This was 1,500 meters. A bullseye on the first shot. Instead of studying why not become a military king, Gao Yang fired 2 shots, got a little tired, holding the rifle with his left hand, switched to his right hand, and continued firing. The staff member opened his mouth, but said nothing, though his eyes were full of confusion. His worldview had been shattered by Gao Yang. How could a sharpshooter casually change shooting stances? For an ordinary person, switching hands to right was already impressive, but switching hands to snipe, and still getting bullseyes. A god of marksmanship. After emptying the magazine, Gao Yang put down the rifle. Can't shoot farther. Can you prepare a moving target? Yes. The staff member pressed a button on the controller, and the distant target began to move. Gao Yang started firing. Bang! A loud crack. Bullseye. The staff member stared blankly at the shooting range. He could barely see the target with his naked eye, but it was moving. A second later, Gao Yang fired again. Bullseye. Another magazine emptied. Gao Yang set down the rifle. Shooting was definitely a strenuous task. Both arms were sore, but he had roughly tested the rifle's performance. It was a perfect shot every time. It could hit not only fixed targets, but also moving ones considering air humidity and bullet drop. Such a rifle on a training battlefield was a bit unfair, but it was also incredibly reliable. Gao Yang put the rifle back into the case, turned around, and went back to the dormitory to with this thing the training exercise should have no suspense. The staff member watched Gao Yang leave and began cleaning up the site. First he replaced the target paper. Then looking at the 200-meter target paper, the staff member's gaze froze again, because there was only one bullet hole on it. That meant all 12 of Gao Yang's bullets had passed through that single small hole. How was this possible? He hurriedly checked the second target paper. Also only one bullet hole. But this was a 500-meter target. The staff member suspected a system malfunction, because the first shot hit and all subsequent shots were judged as bullseyes. Otherwise, there was no explanation for how all bullets at 500 meters hit the tiniest central point. This wasn't a sharpshooter, this was cheating in the game of Earth-OL. The 1,000-meter target also had only one hole, making the staff member even more certain that the system must have. The two target papers at 1,500 meters left the staff member silent for a long time. Both papers also had only one bullet hole, but the hole's area was larger than those on the other targets. A single bullet couldn't create such a large hole. Multiple bullets had struck the edges around the original hole, enlarging it. At 1,500 meters with a moving target, the central hole had been enlarged by about half a centimeter. That meant with 12 shots fired at a rate of 1 per second, Gao Yang's head area was only the size of a 50-cent coin. How could such marksmanship be so absurd? The staff member fell into deep doubt. Gao Yang returned to the dormitory, slept, and the next morning headed straight to the laboratory. He would first manufacture another sniper rifle. The initial version produced by the system he would keep as a collector's item. He was utterly enamored with it. Early in the morning, Chun Hong entered the laboratory, followed by others who came in one after another to begin manufacturing the guns they had designed. Building guns here was like using a sledgehammer to Gao Yang looked at the classmate who was about to manufacture a sniper rifle. You don't need to make a sniper rifle. I've already made one here. Gao Yang looked at the classmate who was about to manufacture a sniper rifle. You don't need to make a sniper rifle. I've already made one here. The classmates were stunned, but didn't refute, for they saw a new sniper rifle on the table. Its exterior design was exceptionally stylish, even flawless. At first glance, this thing could even pass for a piece of art. With a barrel length of 1.5 meters, it was relatively long and appeared overwhelmingly domineering. Did you design this sniper rifle? Gao Yang nodded. Range of 3 kilometers, fire rate of 60 rounds per minute. Huh. The student who designed the sniper rifle was bewildered, and Chun Hong and the others around also turned to look. What was the point? Why such a high fire rate for a sniper rifle? Use it like an assault rifle. Moreover, a 3-kilometer range was terrifying. Gao Yang looked up at the group of baffled classmates. It also comes with an auto-aim function. Huh. The crowd became even more perplexed. What did that mean? Auto-aim. It was normal for drones or fighter jets to have auto-aim, but having auto-aim on a sniper rifle was... Gao Yang waved his hand. Let's get busy. First, manufacture a full set of equipment before the combat team arrives. We can't have the guns unfinished when they get here. Everyone hurried into action. The student who had designed the sniper rifle, now useless, began helping others with manufacturing. Gao Yang also shuttled around the laboratory, making 2 additional sniper rifles to ensure enough firepower. Meanwhile, he temporarily improved and assisted in crafting the others' firearms. From day to night, a total of 10 sets of individual combat equipment were completed. That evening, 2 military vehicles arrived at the National University of Defense Technology. A 10-man combat team from the Special Operations Forces. They were the pawns for this exercise. Before coming, the 10 soldiers already knew what they were supposed to do, and they were curious about what kind of weapons these students would provide them. Driven by curiosity, the 10 soldiers entered the shooting range. Inside the range were 11 people in total. Gao Yang stood at the front, a smile on his face. Hello, I'm Gao Yang, the captain of this exercise's design team. All 10 saluted simultaneously. Gao Yang returned the salute and pointed to the equipment on the table. You can go change into the gear first. Today, get a basic understanding, and we have 3 more days for training and familiarization. The 10 soldiers took a pile of equipment and headed to the changing room next to the range. Squad leader, I feel like we're going to lose. Lose? This equipment is too conventional. Ordinary firearms, bulletproof vests, tactical helmets. Everything looks standard. Who says that? This sniper rifle is definitely something special. The team sniper had already picked up the sniper rifle, trying to shoulder it. Holy crap, the feel is amazing. Even better than my original wife. So you're getting a new wife. Need to test it more? All looks and no function won't cut it. The sniper fiddled with the rifle. So cool, this scale-like design can even move. The others were more pessimistic. What good was a weapon that looked flashy but had no practical value? But since the design teams were randomly assigned, they couldn't switch and had to accept their fate. After donning the gear, the 10 walked out of the room. Chun-Hong and the classmates helped the soldiers familiarize themselves with the equipment. The familiarization process consisted of everyone tested the pistols first. After emptying a magazine, all the soldiers were stunned. This pistol felt incredibly comfortable, and its accuracy was very high. Using it was exceptionally smooth. So smooth that you couldn't help but want to pull the trigger. There was recoil, but it was relatively small. Looking at the bullet holes on the distant target, they were almost clustered together, showing extremely high stability. The 10 instinctively exchanged glances, all seeing surprise in each other. This gun was really good. If the other basic performance didn't lag behind, it could be fielded on a small scale. Next, they tested the rifles and grenades. The soldiers were once again astonished because the performance of these weapons also exceeded their expectations. They were not just good, they were remarkably effective. The guns they originally used were the latest models, but these felt significantly better than the newest ones they were currently equipped with. Even in terms of performance parameters, they completely outclassed them. Then it was time to test the sniper rifles. There were 2 sniper rifles, and the 2 snipers lay down, aimed at targets 200 meters away, and fired simultaneously. Bang! The thunderous roar came almost simultaneously. Then came the report, 10 points, 10 points. The surrounding soldiers applauded. First shot, both scoring 10s. That was some luck. Only Gao Yang's team members were expressions of shock and disbelief. They recalled what Gao Yang had said: the rifle came with an auto-aiming system. As for the 2 snipers lying on the ground, they turned their heads to look at each other, both utterly bewildered. How could the recoil be so light? Besides the minimal recoil, the rifle seemed incredibly accurate. They hadn't even been confident of hitting the target on their first shot. Withdrawing their gazes, they fired. Boom! Another deafening sound. 10 points, 10 points. 2 more 10s. The remaining 8 soldiers stopped clapping and instead looked astonished. If it were their familiar sniper rifle, hitting 10 consistently at 200 meters would be normal, even expected. But this was a new gun. How could it be so accurate? Gao Yang spoke up. Adjust to 1500 meters. Both snipers simultaneously turned their heads to Gao Yang. 1500 meters. Was he dreaming? With such light recoil, how can this rifle have a range of 1500 meters? Gao Yang said calmly. This rifle has a range of 300 meters. The 2 snipers were even more dumbfounded. Impossible. But since Gao Yang said so, they might as well try. The staff arranged for a change of shooting area. The 2 snipers lay down again, peered through the scope at the distant target board, and began to steady their breathing while attempting to aim. At 1500 meters they could normally hit it, but with a new rifle they had no confidence. They didn't know the bullet drop value, and could only rely on feel to try. Gao Yang's voice rang out. No need to aim too precisely. This rifle has an auto-aim function. Lock onto the target, and just fire. Both snipers looked up in confusion. What? Don't aim, just fire. The 2 snipers almost followed the order and fired directly. Boom. 2 gunshots rang out simultaneously, followed by the report, 10 points, 10 points. The snipers were stunned, and the other soldiers were also stunned. Chun-Hong and the others from the research team widened their eyes simultaneously. How was this possible? They were certain that the 2 snipers hadn't aimed. They had even lifted their heads, and the rifles had wavered. Yet they still scored 10s. 1 10 might be sheer luck, but both 10s. Auto-aim. Was this cheating? The 2 snipers were also deeply shocked. They exchanged glances, then lowered their heads and fired. This time, they deliberately aimed elsewhere, offset by at least 2 meters. Just before pulling the trigger, they saw the rifle quickly adjust its angle. By the time they fired, the muzzle had automatically aligned with the center of the target board. 10 points, 10 points.